2 of the Acts of 2023, this meeting will be conducted in person and as a courtesy via remote means in accordance with applicable law. Please note that while an option for remote attendance and/or participation is being provided as a courtesy to the public and board members, the meeting and hearing will not be suspended or terminated if technological problems interrupt the virtual broadcast unless required by law. This meeting will be recorded by the local scene, formerly known as pac-tv. Members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so by viewing the Duxbury Government Access Channels, Verizon 39 or Comcast 9. Viewers can also visit https the local scene.media/Duxbury/ for information about Duxbury programming, including streaming and watching replays on Duxbury YouTube. With that, I call the meeting to order. I'm going to postpone the Pledge of Allegiance and open forum until 6:30. And we can start with the executive session. We do have to make a motion before we go offline, so I will ask our clerk to do so.
I move that we go into executive session for the following purpose: to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real estate if the chair declares, since an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the public body, and if the chair so declares, in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21, the Select Board will adjourn immediately after the completion of this executive session and reconvene an open session on or around 6:30 p.m.
As chair, I
Second.
I'm sorry. We'll do that in a second.
Oh, that, yes,
It
I'm
follows
sorry,
my
you're right.
declaration.
You're right. I'm sorry.
As chair, I declare the necessity for an executive session to discuss strategy with respect to consideration of the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real estate, as to do so in an open session may have a detrimental effect on the town's negotiating position. And I need a second and a roll call vote.
Cindy, aye.
Amy, aye.
Brian, aye.
Michael, aye. We can enter that. Are live and back. Now that we're back in a open session, I had postponed the Pledge of Allegiance in open forum, so we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next, we have open forum. This is not to discuss any items that are on the current agenda for tonight. This is an opportunity for the members of the public to raise something that they'd like on a future agenda. We can't deliberate or discuss it, so if we are mute, it's because we cannot. We'll violate open meeting law. If you have something, you are welcome to stand to the podium. I will start with the board members first. Go ahead.
I'm having a concern, and I'm not quite sure, probably I should contact Steve Studley, but the traffic on the beach road with the snowy owls and short-eared owls and whatnot, people are walking across the marsh, been down there, and they're just paying no attention to the fact that they shouldn't be walking across the marsh, let alone getting so close to the birds, and parking along the road, so it's and without stickers. And I know there's beach people down there, but people are getting by them somehow without stickers. And I think we've made accommodations so that you could actually go online and get a temporary winter permit. I mean, if you get down there, you could still do it and then get down the road. But I'm hoping that the fact that you're writing down on that paper, Rainey, means that you're going to be doing
It's not tic-tac-toe. Yes,
Thank
I am
you.
writing it down. Yeah, I know that Artie's aware.
Yeah.
Steve is aware. I saw it this morning, so I will be sure to bring it back up to him.
Okay, thanks.
Amy, did you have something?
I have two things. First, just a feel-good thing, which is just a shout-out to all my neighbors in Tinkertown for another great year of the luminaries. It is a labor of love for all the 137 families that participate in that. And it is an amazing display, and I hope everybody got a chance to see it. If they were still going at 5:15, I can attest to that in the morning. The second issue I would like to raise is on Route 3, both north and south, there has been a lane shift. The lanes are narrowed and shifting. I think it is all a part of the, I'm at least assuming that it's part of the
East Street Bridge.
East Street Bridge. But in doing that, they have shifted lanes, and there is a very dangerous situation with a guardrail that protrudes into the fast lane. I don't know if everybody's seen it. Going both south and north is my understanding. It's also my understanding that it was there was a tragic accident involving that guardrail. I've had numerous phone calls from residents that are concerned about that. I've talked to Rob Reardon, our fire chief. He agrees that it is a very dangerous situation, and I'm not sure what we could do, but that certainly would be something that the town could reach out to the state in hopes of some type of remediation, some looking at it. Let's try to make that a better situation and avoid future tragedies. That's all
It's actually the Franklin, Sheila just let me know, it's the Franklin Street Bridge replacement, but we will talk.
Okay.
Sheila and I will talk, and we'll talk to MassDOT and figure it out.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other board members?
Two things, Mr. Chairman. First, as you may recall, the town of Duxbury is a member of the MBTA Advisory Board. I'm the delegate. We also serve on the commuter rail subcommittee. Richard Prone, my predecessor, spent quite a lot of time and effort doing that. I've followed in his footsteps. Just reporting to this board that we've been appointed as the vice chair of the commuter rail subcommittee. So congratulations to that.
No commuter rail.
Yeah, no commuter rail, but that's all right. We'll serve cheerfully in that position. Secondly, and last but not least, I want to acknowledge somebody who typically reports the news, but has made some news In the last edition of the Duxbury Clipper in December, Susanna Sheehan was recognized for 30 years of reporting on select board meetings. And I see that Susanna is here tonight, and if I can have you just stand for a sec so everybody can see you. I'd just like to offer your congratulations. Thank you for all your reporting, and I can't, I'm speaking for myself, probably speaking for all of you, I couldn't imagine being in these meetings for 30 years, but thank you so much.
Always changing. It's a challenge.
The historical knowledge.
Yeah, that's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I just have a quick thing. I wanted to congratulate the Duxbury Fire Department for representing this town very well yesterday at the New England Patriots game. The color guard did a wonderful job, and it was nice to see them proudly displaying our colors. So nice work by our fire department. I don't see anyone at the podium, so I'm going to move right on to new business. We have a lot on the agenda tonight. And the first is a recognition of some new Eagle Scouts, Kyle Campbell and Owen Farrell. Are you both in the town? I saw Kyle. We have, you can,
Hey, come stand up.
yeah,
Join us
why
right
don't you
at the
come
front.
right up? You can kind of, we'll put you front and center. You can be in that
you
corner
go.
and just kind of turn around. It's obviously the highest level of achievement for the boys, for the Scouts, and we're really proud of our scouting program here in town, and the work that these young men do at a young age, and their maturity and ability to get through that program is really commendable. So I do have 2 resolutions, and I'm going to read them in their entirety. The first, a resolve to honor Kyle D. Campbell. Whereas Kyle Campbell began Scouts in elementary school with the Weeblo Cub Scouts and is a young Scout, gained experience while assisting older Scouts with their Eagle Scout projects. Whereas Kyle Campbell's Eagle Scout project entailed building 3 wooden benches for the historic O'Neill Farm to provide seating for hikers, families, and trail guests at key points of interest along the trails. And whereas Kyle Campbell managed the entire project, including the planning, building, site clearing, working in partnership with the Wildlands Trust, and recruiting and supervising other Scout volunteers who assisted with the project. And whereas Kyle Campbell's Eagle Scout project benches will provide a welcomed respite for all trail guests to sit and enjoy nature for years to come. And whereas Kyle Campbell is currently attending Duxbury High School, where he is captain of the Duxbury rowing team and a recipient of the Duxbury Crew Cone Award 2024. Kyle is looking to attend college outside of New England to pursue business management. We wish him well in his future endeavors. Now, therefore, be it resolved on this 6th day of January 2025 that the town of Duxbury, through the Select Board and Town Manager, do hereby commend Kyle Campbell on attaining the rank of Eagle Scout. Nice work. A resolve to honor Owen M. Farrell. Whereas Owen Farrell began Scouts in elementary school with the Weeblo Scouts, Cub Scouts, and whereas Owen Farrell completed his Eagle Scout project working in collaboration with the Duxbury Bay Maritime School by refurbishing a sailing dock in need of repair. And whereas Owen Farrell demonstrated leadership by managing this project from conception, including the planning, building, and ensuring the safety of the dock for its continued use by the high school sailing team and the students participating in the summer programs at DBMS. And whereas Owen Farrell's Eagle Scout project is commendable for improving the safety of this dock for use by its students and the public for many years to come. And whereas Owen Farrell is currently attending Duxbury High School, where he is president of the National Honor Society and a member of the Duxbury High School rowing team. We wish Owen well as he plans to attend the U.S. Naval Academy. Now, therefore, be it resolved on this 6th day of January 2025 that the town of Duxbury, through the Select Board and Town Manager, do hereby commend Owen Farrell on attaining the rank of Eagle Scout.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Great work.
All right.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank
Well
you.
done. Congratulations. Well done.
Thank you.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, if I can just add, the town is very fortunate to have tremendously strong scouting programs in Duxbury, not just the Cub Scouts, Webelos. We have Troop 62, which these boys are from. We also have Troop 1792, the first girls Scouts BSA program in Duxbury, and the third in the Commonwealth. So we have our bases covered here in our little town, and we have a terrific program. I just want to acknowledge the leaders who make it all possible and donate all their time. It takes a lot, so thank you, everybody. Thanks.
All right.
That's right.
All right. The next item on the agenda is an acceptance of gift donation in memory of David Philbrook. Mrs. Elaine Philbrook, the wife of David Philbrook, would like to graciously donate funds raised through a GoFundMe account for the purchase of a memorial bench and any equipment for the Conservation Department in memory of her husband David, who passed away on November 19th, 2024. Dave was a longtime resident of Duxbury and an integral part of the conservation team for over 3 years in the role of land management assistant. If you have walked on our trail system, you have likely encountered his handiwork, whether it be paths he cleared or the countless bridges, boardwalks, and benches he built or repaired. And if anybody would like to step forward to the mic and say a few words, you're welcome to.
Over with her.
The microphone needs to pick you up.
My husband loved this town, and he dearly loved this community, and he certainly loved his job working the trails. Sorry.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Select Board accept with the deepest heartfelt gratitude the donation of funds for a memorial bench and equipment for the Conservation Department in fond memory of David Philbrook.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much.
Thank
We really
you.
appreciate
You will
it.
Thank
be
you very much.
so missed.
Great. We have a discussion regarding the Harbor Walk acceptance of easement with the Duxbury Rural Historic Society approved at the November 18th, 2024 special town meeting. Ms. Sabrina Kaplan of the Duxbury Rural Historic Society is in attendance to answer any further questions. Sabrina, I saw you somewhere. There you are. Does anybody have any questions about this from the board?
Nope, we've already reviewed and approved it, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, it was reviewed by council,
Yep.
so.
All right. Does anybody from the public have any questions about this at this point? All right, with that, I will take.
May I make one
Go right ahead.
comment on this?
Sure.
Just full disclosure, moving forward, I think everybody, when we first talked about this, it had come to my attention that you're going to be seeking, or there's a request for monies through the CPC funding to actually build the infrastructure, whatever needs to be done with the easement. So I just want to make sure that that's on everybody's radar as to where this kind of goes next.
All right.
Happy to offer a motion, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I move the Select Board approve and execute the acceptance of easement from the Duxbury Rural and Historical Society on the property located on Washington Street as further described on a plan entitled Plan of Land in Duxbury, Mass., prepared for the Duxbury Rural and Historical Society, Inc., drawn by Webby Engineering Associates, dated October 7, 2024, as presented.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right. Thank you, Sabrina. All right.
Commissioners?
Water and Sewer Commissioners, I believe we have to
We
have a
do.
motion to enter that.
I move that the Select Board adjourn the meeting in order to meet as the Water and Sewer Commissioners with the intent of reconvening as the Select Board afterward. Requires a roll call.
Yes.
Second first.
You may.
Fernando, aye.
Brian, aye.
Michael, aye.
Amy, aye.
Cindy, aye.
All right. We have a discussion with our PFAS working group to present the prioritization plan and recommendations.
Hold,
Who will be leading us off with this?
and I thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
Very much.
Thank you.
I'm going to pass this down to Rainey.
No, I was going
Yeah.
to, yes.
Or, yeah, you're probably.
Yeah. Wait, you can put it in your pocket.
No, I was making sure it went to.
Give the check tomorrow.
He was making sure he didn't put it
I'm
in
just
my
going to leave it
pocket.
at that.
Put on a second.
All right. Hi, Candace.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Candace Martin, 59 Gurnett Road. I wanted to do a brief introduction before we get into the presentation. A little over a year ago, I sat here in one of the Select Board's meetings and heard about the PFAS prioritization. So the effort has now culminated to us providing a report and recommendations to you. Wanted to acknowledge the Water and Sewer Advisory Board members, Tanya Trevisan, Bo Boynton, Paul Cohen, and expertise from Jim Bagley, and Melissa Rosenblatt is not here tonight, but might be listening in.
She's right there.
Right there.
I'm sorry. We met
But
continuously.
before you finish, Candace, I also want to recognize you for the role that you played in leading this forward, and we couldn't have done it without you, so thank you very much.
It was a pleasure to get to know the different members of the town, too. It was a fun experience. With that, the recommendations is an overview. We feel it's really important that we develop a water conservation plan. Currently, our usage is, it triples in the summer with the seasonal usage for lawn irrigation. It's over double of what the Massachusetts water management standard is. So there's a great effort that needs to be taken to educate people on we're developing drinking water quality, and we're using it for lawn irrigation. But that does not mean that if we do reduce the water conservation, that we can, as we know right now, can avoid doing the priority project. So the priority project, we will go through the details of how we selected the Tremont Depot well, but that it's something that needs to be done fairly quickly. We had one of the first activities we had done is to hire a consultant to develop the prioritization plan, but we also recommended at last year's town meeting to get funding, so as soon as we identified and approved of the priority well, that we would proceed with the engineering. We had thought that the design and construction would take about 2.5 years. It's a little bit more than that in the timeline estimated by Apex, formerly Environmental Partners. So as we go through tonight, it's the priority project needs to be put forth. We need to move forward with the owner's project manager. We've gone out to bids and have awarded that, but also need to begin development of the RFQ for the design. So it's really important. You'll hear about the details with that. We'll also hear about the Partridge Well, which triggered a lot of this discussion, that was once the priority well. It's now the number 2. With the criteria we set up, but it's an old well, low capacity. It's in a really suspect area, both from the landfill and also the closeness of septic systems or the congestion there. We also want to recommend that the next priority, while we have time to reassess the cost and execution plan for that it should be the Damon and Millbrook well systems. We would say that should start in 2026. We are also recommending, in order to fully assess the prioritization plan and the cost of doing those, the second and the third priority wells, to start with what is called a pilot study, which begins the permitting process for those wells, and that we should put forth a warrant article recommending that we include the pilot study cost for Lakeshore, Damon, and Millbrook, and that will allow us in next year to put forth a warrant article if needed for subsequent wells and have a good detailed plan. We also have evaluated tea kettle based on the length of time that would be needed to permit. While there's good information, there's things that we could do to make sure the easements are maintained around there, that well, and that we're securing the Zone 1 protection. We feel at this time that no further work should be done on that. So with that, I'll turn it over to Apex, or Alston Potts will be going through more detailed information. We'll field questions at the end.
Thank you, Candace. Good evening. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
I probably don't need the microphone, honestly.
That's for people at home.
Yeah,
Doesn't, yeah.
good. So I'm here to talk about the, can we back it up a couple of hairs, if you don't mind? No worries at all. So good evening. I'm here to talk about, as Candace said, the PFAS prioritization plan effort in our draft report that we issued in November. So if we can go to the next slide. My name is Alston Potts. I'm a project manager at Apex Companies, again, formerly Environmental Partners. Here tonight as well is Ryan Trahan, our Senior Vice President, to talk through our efforts so far. On the next slide, I'll go through our agenda. So we're going to talk about PFAS data and compliance. We'll talk about evaluation of supply and demand, prioritization, summary of schematic engineering, conclusions and recommendations, and then we have time at the end for questions and answers. With that said, and as I'm sure the members of the Select Board who've seen the report know, this is a very dense document. There's a lot of information in it. I could probably take all day to talk about it. So there will be some information that's not included in this summary. So I expect that you'll have questions as we go through. As that is the case, I may ask that we wait on a particular question, as I might answer it later in the presentation, just for the sake of efficiency. And I'll make sure to double back and confirm that we've answered the question. So to start, PFAS data and compliance, I'll keep this one short. We've done this before. If you don't mind going to the next slide. But for those who aren't aware, so what we're talking about tonight are per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. It's a group of synthetic chemicals that are used in many products, and they're known as quote-unquote forever chemicals. I'm sure many of us have at least heard that buzzword. So they don't break down easily in the environment. They're pretty pervasive, et cetera. So recently, as of this year, April 2024, the EPA released their final regulations for drinking water as it has to do with these compounds. And there are several compounds here on the screen. The table shows a summary of what those regulations are. MCL stands for maximum contaminant level. This is the regulatory limit that drinking water cannot exceed. MCLG is the maximum contaminant level goal. This is what the EPA identified as their goal, but sometimes they differ from the MCL just based on, what is reasonable. Not reasonable, but what they can reasonably expect water systems to achieve. After that, the regulations were released. It came along with a compliance deadline. What that means is that any water system within the United States has to be in compliance with this PFAS MCL by April 2029. On a state level, Mass DEP, our Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection, has until April 2026 to either promulgate the rules as EPA has set forth, or to make them more stringent. They can't become less stringent is the key here. So there's still a little bit of unknown surrounding that. We don't yet know exactly how DEP is going to proceed. So without getting too much into too much more detail, when we look at the compounds in the table, the one that is most prevalent here in Duxbury, which is going to kind of be our focal point when we talk about compliance, is PFOA. It's the second one in the row there. If we can go to the next slide. So here's a chart that best summarizes how compliance looks in Duxbury based on the information that we've had since the town started sampling in 2021. So there are 3 wells that we expect to be out of compliance. The Depot well, which is our green line there at the top. The Partridge well, which is the blue line. These are well-known, well-documented issues in town. These wells are not currently operating and have not been operating for several years at this point. Additionally, the Lakeshore well has had 2 or 3 quarters where its annual average, again, this is just calculated based on how EPA evaluates their compliance. There were several quarters in a row where the Lakeshore well would have been out of compliance if those regulations were currently in effect. Additionally, the Damon wells and the Millbrook well may fall out of compliance in the future. And what I mean by that is, while they appear below this 4 mark here, there have been, for each well, there have been more than one sample that has a concentration in excess of that MCL. Compliance is going to be based on a running average. So an individual point doesn't necessarily put you out of compliance, but it points to the fact that there may be issues with compliance in the future. And then not shown on this chart are the 3 other sources that are unlikely to fall out of compliance. I'm not sure what happened there. So it's the Tremont wells, Mayflower wells, and Evergreen wells. Those all had averages of 0 as the EPA evaluates it. So the question that we have to ask ourselves from here is, understanding the compliance, where Duxbury's sources fall based on the information that we have, how does that future compliance potentially affect the town's water supply and ability to meet demands? And even, thinking about that, what does the current supply and demand picture look like? If we can go to we can skip 2 slides, I think. Thank you. So Duxbury has 8 groundwater sources. It includes a total of 12 wells. This is what we call our supply here. In our report, we use this thing called firm capacity. This is a planning mechanism that we use when we're doing master plans and things like that. Essentially, you look at all of the available water you have in your supply, and then you take out the biggest well. Something can happen. A well fails, a flood occurs, anything. You lose power. So this is sort of a way to look at the redundancy of your water system. So when I'm talking about firm capacity here, that's what I'm talking about. We looked at the system as a whole, and that capacity is just under 4 million gallons per day. We also looked at the high pressure zone. As some of you may know, but others may not, Duxbury is separated into 2 pressure zones, the low and the high zone. The water department has the ability to move water from the high zone into the low zone, but they do not have the ability to go in the opposite direction. So when we're looking at the ability to meet demands, we identified the high pressure zone as a potential issue for redundancy, because you don't have that capability at the moment. So understanding our supply, we now usually compare firm capacity to the maximum day demand. What that is, it's just a 24-hour period in a single year where the water supplies pump the most water. And so all of this is based on the master plan that we issued, I believe, in May 2023. So we used data from 2015 to 2020 for all of this. So the system-wide maximum day demand, an average between those years, was under that the system-wide firm capacity. So that's a good thing. That's what we want to see, right? We want to see that our supply exceeds our capacity, or exceeds our demands, rather. However, there was a single year, it was in 2017, where that maximum day demand actually exceeded the firm capacity. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that the water system in that moment couldn't meet that demand. It just means that if there were issues with supply or wells were offline, there could have been a situation where it would have been difficult to meet those demands. The high pressure zone does not have this similar issue. We'll look at some graphs to kind of visualize this data as well here in a second, but we also looked at the maximum day demand for the high pressure zone. Now, Duxbury is a predominantly residential use community. 93 to 95% of all of your water system demands come from residential users. So when we're looking at the drivers for demand, we want to look at that particular use point. The way that water systems are required to perform when it comes to residential use, they have this metric called residential gallons per capita per day. What that essentially is it's averaged over a year, and it's just a measure of, on average, how much water did a single person in town consume. They have a performance standard, they being the state, of 65 gallons per day per person. On average, between 2015 and 2020, Duxbury was at 79, which is about 18% higher than the performance standard. This plot shows here an estimate of how that might look over a full year. Now, we don't, the high numbers in the summer don't need to be below 65. All of these values just need to average out below 65. So what we're seeing here is a huge spike in the summer. This is typical. The spike might be higher than what you typically see, and it's driven predominantly by non-essential outdoor water use. So that's the story of the current supply and demand picture. There's obviously an opportunity here to improve that without any particular treatment, obviously. But now, understanding that current picture, we need to kind of look at what happens if we fall out of compliance in other ways in the future. Additional wells have to come offline. How does that impact supply and demand? If you don't mind going to the next slide. Okay. So this chart here, we're looking at the entire water system. Our gray bars that's supply, and our horizontal lines are different scenarios of maximum day demand. Well, I used scenario, but for each of our supplies, we were looking at 5 things. The first one on the left is the dream scenario where every single water supply is available. So this includes both Depot and Partridge, and it also includes Lakeshore not having restrictions on its capacity due to water quality. Scenario 2 is actually our second bar here is where the town is currently operating. So this is your current firm capacity in town based on those wells being offline. And as you can see, the current firm capacity does not meet that highest maximum day demand here, 4.63. And if additional supplies are lost, so scenario 3 is the same as scenario 2, but without Lakeshore well, which is one of the wells that is likely out of compliance in the future. Scenario 4 is loss of Millbrook. This is not in addition to Lakeshore, this is separate. So obviously these things would compound if more than one comes offline. And then scenario 5 represents the Damon wells number 1 and 2. So if there are additional supplies lost, the water system may have trouble meeting maximum day demands in the future, essentially. Our black, and this is our average maximum day demand here, our red line. Our black line down here is what if residential gallons per capita day was reduced to meet the performance standard. This is an approximation. I don't know exactly what this number is going to look like if you do manage to hit 65, but let's say it's about 18% lower than the current demand. As you can see, it'll provide a lot more flexibility for the town to meet a range of system-wide maximum day demands. So while it doesn't necessarily solve the issue, it will definitely support the water department in being able to be flexible to meet these high demands in the future. And of course, it's during the summer, and during the summer is when things break. All of our air conditionings tend to break in the summer, right? So the more flexibility that we have for various pieces of equipment, for pumps, it's helpful for them. If we can go to the next slide. So this is similar. Oh, no worries. Thank you, Nancy. So this is similar, looking at the high pressure zone. I won't go through all the details again, but big picture, it's a bit rosier in the high pressure zone. The only thing to note that is if the lakeshore, if the water department loses the Lakeshore Drive well, it may not be able to meet that highest observed maximum day demand in 2017. And just as with the system-wide demands, if we can reduce residential gallons per capita, if we can reduce demands, we can improve flexibility. I would say that in comparison to the system-wide picture, this is looking a lot better, less dire, I suppose. If we can go to the next slide. So now that we understand compliance and how that potentially could affect supply and demand in the future, how do you prioritize the work? What is the work? So our task was to look at what it would take to treat for PFAS at all of the sources, understanding that the treatment goals of the town are something that will be up to you all to decide. So this is, ooh, wow, this really did not transfer well. Okay, that's okay. The important thing is the table. So we came up with, in cooperation with the PFAS Working Group, with the Water Sewer Advisory Board, with the DPW, we came up with 4 criteria for prioritizing potential projects. And so we looked at each well, and I guess just before I move on here, to address it, the blue color-coded wells indicate wells that either are likely out of compliance, or wells that may be out of compliance. Whereas and I'm not exactly sure what it looks like to you from here, but the lighter color, which I believe is like an orange-pink, are wells that are not currently, based on current information, in danger of falling out of compliance with EPA's ruling. All right, so to start with compliance, which is our first criteria here, the intent of this is to look at how readily each source meets drinking water regulations for PFAS compounds. So we gave more points, higher priority to wells that were in more need of treatment, if that makes sense. So for 45 points, we gave wells 45 points if they have, from the chart that we looked at earlier, if the annual average exceeded the MCL, so out of compliance at some point. 25 points were for the wells that had individual samples above that level, but would not be out of compliance the way that EPA has written it. And then 5 points would be for any well that doesn't have any samples in excess of those levels. So big picture, Depot, Partridge, unsurprisingly, are at 45 points. Mayflower, Evergreen, Tremont are at 5 points. Then we looked at criticality. So what this is we tried to identify what is the most important source, right? You could have Partridge well, which still scores highly, but you could have Partridge well, which is a very low producer, but has really high PFAS, the highest in the system. Or you have a well like the Damon wells, which are a good producer, but aren't necessarily at this point out of compliance. How do you kind of balance those two things? And so what we looked at was the maximum single day pumped volume, so just an actual number of what this well does rather than what it's allowed to do. And we ranked them from highest producers to lowest producers, and we gave them 40 points, 35 points, 30 points, et cetera, down to 5, just based on how they ranked. And looking at system capacity, so this considers whether a water quality improvement would improve the firm capacity of the water system. So are you bringing a well back online, or are you increasing the capacity of a well? This affects only 3 wells. Only 3 wells got points for this. The Depot Street well, the Partridge well, and Lakeshore. As we know, Depot and Partridge are offline. The Lakeshore well, its flow is currently reduced because it has higher levels of manganese, and they get worse at higher flow rates. So the water department has reduced that to mitigate any water quality issues. If it had treatment, it would be able to produce to its fullest potential. And the numbers here, the 10 and the 5, is just based on the amount of volume that would add. And finally, as we talked about the high pressure zone, we also wanted to give consideration to the fact that there is less built-in redundancy in the high pressure zone, as it's sort of on its own island, as I mentioned. So we simply gave 5 points to all of the wells that feed that zone. And big picture, as you can see here, the rankings are the Depot Street well is the #1 ranked well, whereas the Evergreen, Millbrook, and Tremont wells are ranked the lowest based on the scoring total. And we'll get into sort of how this feeds into the projects later, because we're talking about individual wells. We're not talking about treatment where we're combining wells.
Could I ask a quick question at this juncture where
Yes,
we're
please.
at the prioritization part? And if we were given Candace kind of summarized the document, the letter that you sent to us. Are the working groups in agreement with the way that this was, these NUP scores and the way that the methodology that was used to prioritize? And are you in agreement with this prioritization as being put forth here?
Yes, we did go through the prioritization and have a couple of facilitated reviews where we did provide additional feedback. We did note that this is prioritization for PFAS remediation. There's also part of the water quality master plan identified a lot of needs within the system. I think the Tremont well was recommended to be with the iron and manganese. That there's also like a balance too. There's well improvements that need to be done, but this is the prioritization of the PFAS only. And while we worked with Apex on the criteria, we all agreed how this vetted out, with the exception that Partridge well, regardless of it being out of service, should not be #2.
Okay, so you don't agree that Partridge should be #2, and because I was reading your memo and trying to just make sure that it's consistent with this. So is that the only difference? You also prioritize Tremont, where Tremont looks down on the list here.
Right, but that
But
needs the filtration for iron and manganese, and it's a combined system. So we'll get into why Depot and Tremont were combined together as the priority. The problem is Partridge well exceeds by over 20 parts per trillion, so it can't be disregarded in the prioritization, but in the overall scheme of what's needed, it's not the priority at this point.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to follow up on that, because Amy's kind of going down the same road where I was going as I was reading through all this stuff over the weekend. And one thing that I really can't get my head around, and I'm hoping somebody can explain it, is why we're prioritizing and I'm going to call them the dirtiest wells, which are going to these are eye-watering numbers that we're looking at, and especially in the face of a potential override this spring. I'm very concerned about how we're allocating our very limited resources on an essential resource. I mean, one of the most important things the town does is provide potable water for the community. So as I was going through the report and was looking at compliance, for example, you've got Depot and Partridge, both of which are offline, both of which are fairly low yielding, and we're looking to spend potentially $10 million-ish on those two alone, and I'm trying to understand, and I'm a little frustrated, but I'm trying to understand how we're prioritizing those first, being the dirtiest and lowest yielding, as opposed to, and I'm not an engineer, and I appreciate all the work that's been done here, but why are we not first going after I'd call them the lower hanging fruit, the water that's not as dirty? Why would we not be deploying our capital there first, knowing that it's easier to clean up, as opposed to pulling the really dirty stuff out of the ground, knowing that it's going to be very expensive to treat and to dispose of? So I'm just hoping to go through a little bit more of the scoring, to Amy's point, and why the compliance score. So you see Depot and Partridge being so high, especially where they're not even able to contribute to the low pressure zone, for example.
Sure. So Depot and Partridge, really the reason to treat Depot is because it's dirty, is our viewpoint. The other wells, for the most part, so again, Depot and Partridge are the ones that have the highest PFAS levels. So those are the ones that have technically a treatment need. I absolutely understand the point on Partridge Road. It does like 120 gallons per minute, I think, which is by far the lowest producing well. And it's in a difficult neighborhood to build something, etc. But the Depot Street well, which has been offline for quite some time, what it does is it adds capacity. Remember, we were just talking about all of the needs in the water system in terms of not just water quality, but the capacity, the ability to meet, for supply to meet demand. Putting a treatment plant or a PFAS treatment plant at Evergreen or Mayflower, for example, does not really offer much in the way of shoring up those capacity needs. And in order for you to get that capacity back for Depot, in order to run it, it requires treatment. And Ryan has a perspective that he would like to share as well.
I'd like to, I thought we were going to wait until the end before we ask these questions, but can I make some comments then, or what? So this is driven by our need to meet summer demand. All right, if you look at the tables here, we actually are under the 65, right? So I've got these tables for last year, right? All wells are online, except for Depot and Partridge, right? But they're toned down, right? He's got the volume knob down. So he produces basically 1 million gallons per day. All right, we get them from all the wells, produce 1 million gallons a day, and that's under the 65. All right, it includes the Lakeshore well, which in 2029 more than likely will be offline. Right, so the water department can turn that one off, and then operate the rest. Just increase the volumes in the other wells. All right, so this is the problem I have with understanding Depot Street. Right, and the drive to do it now. We are right in the middle of doing a water rate study, which includes the cost of all the work that needs to be done in the water. Remember the master plan, there's about $50-60 million worth of work. Right. We haven't increased our rates for 16 years, right? We are not getting the money that we need to maintain and operate the current water infrastructure, right? At some point, once we do the water rate study, which I believe sometime is going to be in 6 months' time, we'll know.
No, you're going to January 27th.
January 27th, even better, right? Even better, right? So I think it's Mark Cloud's experience in Situate, if I got the town right, was that once we actually started charging people for what they had to pay for their water, behaviors changed, and behaviors changed very quickly. And so I'm just concerned that we're prioritizing and planning for a summer usage, which might evolve and change very quickly when people start realizing how much they have to pay, because we're going to throw in there not just the cost to get the system up to where it should be,
which is the water, but would also include at least some PFAS mitigation for the most critical wells, which are Lakeshore, Damon number 1, and Millbrook, right? We may never have to do any work on Depot Street if people's behaviors change in time, right? So I'm just a bit, you brought it up last time, right? Why are we spending quality money cleaning water up, which we're going to dump back into the ground, right? So I'm just concerned about at the pace at which we're progressing our plan here, and there needs to be. I think there's going to be a change in behaviors. I think we need to focus. Maybe there's just my gut is saying that we need to focus our engineering studies next year on the wells that we know will be out of compliance, which is Lakeshore, Damon 1 and 2, and Millbrook, right? Assuming that while we do that work through 2029, people's behaviors will change such that we will be in compliance. We have enough capacity such that we don't have to do the Depot Street well work. We probably have to do the treatment wells iron manganese because that's part of the quality plan anyway, right? So we're going to do that work. It's just the PFAS mitigation piece for Depot Street. So that's my kind of thought process as I read through the report and kind of looking at what demand is, right? And how we kind of look through and sequence the projects. There's moving pieces, right? There's that demand piece is going to change as people's behaviors change as they have to pay for it versus our needs and our project timing. That's my thought right now.
Yeah, I think you're both circling around the conclusion of, if you read, especially the condensed 17 pages executive summary at the end there, we sort of try to condense it into what's the recommendation now. Again, this was, if based upon a year ago or so, we were looking at putting PFAS treatment at every single well.
Right.
This is the results of sort of the assessment of looking at this and talking about with the working group and also the DPW staff and Mark. The key thing to remember here is that as of today, only Depot and Partridge, since a little bit of Lakeshore, is actually out of compliance.
Right.
Right. 2 of the wells are off. So technically, if those 2 other wells are off and Lakeshore is okay, or you limit that use, you don't have to do any treatment right now, period. Right. And just focus on reducing your summer usage. However, we don't know, first of all, if your decision is going to be to put PFAS treatment at every well or that of the ratepayers, right? Because that's a key question. And that significantly changes not only the overall cost, but the prioritization or how you would attack starting design, piloting, construction, the entire program. It's $100 and something million program, as you probably saw in the big report. So our approach here at the end, and sort of taking his thunder away a bit, but at the end of the conclusion is, this is a living and breathing document. Mass DEP has not yet finalized the regulations, okay? There's been a track record of them actually having some more stringent regulations than EPA, so watch out for that. That could change things tremendously. When we did the master plan 2 years ago, this EPA PFAS thing wasn't known. It wasn't known it was going to be at 4 parts per trillion, okay? And that has completely changed things. Number 2, construction costs. Funding is evolving. New administration is coming in in a couple weeks, right? Lots of things changing on that front and the cost of everything as it progresses. And then seeing that reduction in doing that water conservation program that we're actually pursuing a grant for now on behalf of the town is how impactful will that be in the first year? If you revisit this document, 9 months from now, a year from now, and how much progress has been made, how much education has been put out there. And that's why our recommendation is you don't know how impactful that will be. And because things take so long to design, fund, permit, and construct, is at least get something that's shovel ready, that you're starting on, that's in the master plan already, right? And it's already funded from the last town meeting article. Start on that now. Get it shovel ready. And if it looks like things are in compliance or your things are still in compliance and your summer water use comes down, maybe you push the pause button. You don't have to spend the $38 million.
Right.
So that's ultimately where we're coming.
It sounds right, and I think we've got to figure out what we want to present at the annual town meeting. What sort of funding we need just to carry us through the next year, so as the picture becomes clearer as to what path we take, then we look at the annual town meeting for 2026, we may have additional insight that we'll be able to sharpen our pencil and kind of realize actually how much money we really do need, rather than, going for the Depot Street and Tremont wells, that's $40-50 million, and trying to get that money at the March town meeting. Why don't we basically request enough funding just to get us through that year until the next town meeting, and basically and use that money, but use it, and as the picture changes, we can refine it, and then get the right amount, so to speak, for the right project in 2026.
And I fully respect the Water
Yes.
Supervisory Board's opinion, because they may feel differently about, PFAS is not good anywhere, period. And
Correct.
it's their purview. And if that's what the select board would like to do, and the townspeople, and that is something that it obviously could be done, but obviously it costs money and it's time. And, but that's a whole different
Yeah.
apple to tackle there.
May I ask, where are we on the balance with what was appropriated by town meeting last year on those 2 articles? Do we know what we've spent and?
Yes, we've used half of it. We've used about 300.
Go right ahead. There was 2 articles. So there was one for
700,000?
700,000.
Mark Cloud, Water and Sewer Superintendent.
Yep.
So the Article 14 for 700,000, we've used about 350,000 out of that.
And we have not touched the,
Article 15 was for $1 million.
Yep.
It was a borrowing authorization, which we have not utilized at all yet.
okay.
Right.
And again, this was an effort to move forward to try to beat what we know is going to be kind of a rush in this market. And we also know that Duxbury residents deserve and are demanding safe water to drink for their families. So we wanted to be sure that we were in a position to move forward. The last thing I want to do is get into one of these situations where every year we're throwing a couple of $1 million for these plans to be developed and more investigation. If we have a problem and we know which wells, it sounds like there might be a little bit of disagreement here. I think we all agree that Partridge should not be in the equation.
It is not.
And there's some question as to whether Depot, because of capacity, I'm hearing, and because it's more in the treatment for the manganese and the iron, which is necessary to add to the capacity. I understand that we are in a financial crisis with other matters, with operating in the town, and we are discussing potential overrides. But at the same time, the residents need to be given all of the information about what we're facing as we move forward. The water rates have been talked about. The water rates are going to hit everybody. Everybody is good. There's going to be a shock there with how much more money just using water is going to be. The DPW building hasn't even hit your tax bill yet. That's coming. We have a potential override, and now we have this PFAS. So people have to look at their budget and prioritize. Personally, I think that safe drinking water is going to be pretty high up on the list. And so we need, I didn't realize that you were going to advocate for kind of kicking the can down the road.
No, I'm not kicking down the can.
Okay.
I'm talking about progressing. The issue is, Amy, is once people start realizing how much they have to pay for water, behaviors can change dramatically. I'm just concerned building facilities that we don't need. That we don't need. That's the big question.
I totally
And look, they're all nodding, right? The experts
I respect
are
that,
nodding.
but I also have lived in this town long enough to know, and the town manager here has said it so many times to me, Amy, people want their green lawns. I have been advocating for water conservation since I got on this board. I've been talking about trying to incentivize, drought tolerant, this and that, and I've gotten absolutely nowhere. And now we're not going to move forward because we think people aren't going to care about the green grass. I don't know, guys.
It's not, let's be clear, I'm not kicking down the can down the road. I'm not advocating. I've been pushing this project from the very first go, as you know, Amy.
It's not personal. I'm not personalizing
No,
this,
but
Fernando.
but I'm making it clear. We need to provide clean drinking water. We need to be in compliance with state and
Absolutely.
federal regulations, right? The question is, the big driver for this is water consumption. Are we going to plan and build facilities for peak demand that within a year or 2 years can change dramatically? And we end up building facilities that we actually don't use. And that would be the biggest waste of taxpayers'
Totally
money
agree.
that I can ever imagine. So that's where I am right now. I'm just noodling it. It's so many moving pieces. I don't know what the answer is, but I want to make sure that we progress it. So that's my question. How do we keep this thing going? How do we make sure that we don't lose momentum, all right, and achieve compliance at the date that we're required to achieve compliance?
Okay.
So I think Fernando's correct. And up to a month ago, I agreed with this prioritization plan due to the demand in the system. We do need depot if we're going to run as we have been. But since then, we've been doing work with Raftelis, the engineer that's working on our water and sewer rates, and seeing what he's proposing for increases. I think we'll see a drop off in the demand. And like Fernando said, we may not need depot, so we wouldn't have to spend the money on that. And we could focus on one of our main wells, like possibly Damon, which is a guarantee that we will need.
Now, when you're working with this Raftelis group here, we just passed a new regulation with respect to the expansion of irrigation and new construction that you can't tie into is part of that with the increase in water rates coupled with the fact that you can't expand anymore and you can't.
I think the rates are going to be the driver.
The rates are going to be the driver,
I
not
think
the
so.
ban.
It may not be the first year, but it'll be the second, third, fourth year that you'll see the drop off in demand, and that's when you won't need depot.
But we still need to treat
The other three.
Yes, we
the
do.
others. And
Oh, yeah.
So again, I'm not sure that we should hold off on that. I know that we don't, this is a tough conversation to be having because on Thursday night, we're talking about this big override. But you can't look at these things exclusively. And, we don't have if we put it off for a year, then we're going to have taxpayers angry that, we just passed an override. What do you mean we have to do PFAS mitigation this year? We need to make sure that everybody understands all the issues that we're faced with and help prioritize what is the most important issues to move forward with.
Question, are we going to get information, you were talking about like Lakeshore, for instance, having, being at a decreased capacity now because of its iron and manganese. Is that something that is going to be addressed in terms of being able to, increase the capacity of Lakeshore by addressing those issues? And the second thing I had a question about is you're talking about the high pressure and low pressure and, taking some wells offline, but is that, so if you have high pressure, the high pressure area, and someone had said something about taking Lakeshore off, that's a high pressure well, right? And, that's all part of the equation. I mean, you can't just say, well, we'll take Lakeshore off because it's at lower capacity now and we don't want to treat it, but then is there enough water in that area of town? Because you can't bring it up from the low pressure.
Right, yeah. I don't know if we can go back 2 slides, if you don't mind. So, yeah, just on that point, yes, thank you. So scenario 3 is what would happen. This is the high pressure zone, is what would happen to your firm capacity if you lose Lakeshore. So while this obviously might be a concern, if you have that really high maximum demand again, there might be an issue meeting demands. However, I mean, we're talking about the possibility of people's behavior changing in terms of, seasonal water use. If you do see those drops, then Lakeshore, it might not be worth treating at Lakeshore as well, right? You might not need that well to meet those demands and have the redundancy.
Well, I thought you said that Lakeshore was also manganese and iron at Lakeshore as
Yeah.
well.
Right.
Yeah, so the costs at Lakeshore are higher as a result of that because you need to remove the PFAS treatment systems are very sensitive. You have to remove the metals first. So you would need to remove the manganese before removing the PFAS regardless.
And right now, we don't remove either the manganese or the iron at Lakeshore?
No. There's no sequestration either, right? Okay. Yeah.
But yet we use that water, so,
So, yeah, again, the water department uses it at a lower rate where manganese levels are lower. If they really ride it hard, they turn it up, then they start to pull a lot more out of the ground. So that's why its capacity is reduced at this moment. Would you say that that's correct?
But it's in the water quality plan, right, to address that?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's kind of what we're circling
Yeah.
around. I think we're all kind of talking around the same.
We are.
We're saying we can reduce our summer use. We're saying that we may not have to spend money on Lakeshore Drive, Partridge, right? We could keep those either off and activate them, whatever, right? If we can demonstrate that, we can be closer to that black line, not the high red line, right? And have some consistent results. To me, it's, to your point, it's a little bit of, if you wait too long and you wait to see the results of the summer use dropping, then you're further behind, right? And that's why we're still saying, you start doing and leveraging some of that funding that was put aside last year at the minimum now to start design.
Right.
To have something that's shovel ready.
What you would be recommending Lakeshore well rather than Depot? You
No,
change it?
no.
You still work for Depot?
Depot and Tremont, yeah.
Yeah. The other thing about the Depot Tremont
There's other wells.
combination is that it does address some of the recommendations from the Water System Master Plan, which is the iron and manganese treatment for those wells. So what we're recommending is the addition of PFAS treatment to that prior recommendation,
So,
essentially.
so what you're doing is, Tremont will never have, by looks, if you look at that slide in there, Tremont should never be out of compliance, right? Because it's got 1 part per trillion, 2 parts per
Right.
trillion, right? But what you're saying, it does need the iron and manganese, right? So that's why you're recommending it.
Right.
And then you recommend it to stick Depot with it.
Because they're close together, the depot parcel is very small and could not support the structures required for treatment. And they have similar treatment needs.
So we're doing basically a combination of water quality plan.
Yeah. So you're
Recommendation.
improving water quality in a couple of ways by, that project would improve water quality in a couple of ways. And capacity.
But is the juice worth the squeeze in that case? Because again, it's a fairly low yielding well. And we're
Sure.
going to be spending all these resources on cleaning the raw water,
Right. So
right? So that's where I'm having the issue with the
Yeah.
prioritization of being 45 on the scale, because in my mind, it should be upside down. It should be the other way, that you're cleaning the cleanest water first, and then moving on down, depending on your capacity needs.
Well, as of right now, everything else is generally in compliance, right? So
Except for
except
Lakeshore.
Lakeshore, right, using that minimally, but you could think about the whole timeline to get to 2029, and that's why we're start saying if you start now, and as we're showing as of today, the water use, our capacity taken into account, is troubling, and the quickest way to solve that issue is to put Depot Street online.
Quickest and most expensive.
Yes.
It's part of, right,
Right.
it's part of the treatment process, recommendations that are part of the water quality master plan,
Yeah.
improvements to the well stations that are needed anyway, right? We're trying to couple in some of these recommendations to the master plan are also being taken care of by some of these facility modifications.
But the Lakeshore Drive, you could do, I mean, it's going to be out of compliance, right? Lakeshore more than likely will be out of compliance come September, right? And it also needs iron and manganese, right? So why don't we do that one first instead of Depot? We're advancing getting clean water to be in compliance, we're just saying, instead of Depot, why not Lakeshore?
Well, so Candace does want to say something here in a second
Yeah.
as well. But so if you were to compare those two wells strictly to each other,
Yeah.
Depot is a higher producer than Lakeshore.
Is it, if it was at full capacity?
Correct.
Yeah. And Mr. Glenn, to your comment too, if you say the goal of the town was to have PFAS treatment everywhere, at every well that you want to use for the long term, then I could say we could say Tremont and Depot may not be the first priority.
I don't think we're saying that we want treatment at every well across town,
Because if,
right?
well,
Because,
because right now, those other wells are currently you're in compliance with EPA.
yeah,
So you wouldn't
Yeah.
have to spend that money anyway that you're talking
Correct.
about spending at another well, right? So technically speaking, as of today, the only two wells that you would spend money on if you're having a capacity issue would be Depot or Partridge, or Lakeshore.
but to Fernando's point earlier, though, if we can manage use,
Yeah.
we may not have the issue at all.
Exactly.
But we
Right,
don't know
so-
that.
That's our recommendation, yeah. Right.
We don't know that yet.
Exactly. That's why we're saying to get shovel ready as you start, because that's right, as of today, that's the only well that's out of compliance. That's why it's so, with DEP not having the regulation finalized and with everything changing, and continue starting on something that is shovel ready, I think is important to keep moving down the right road. But you could have someone like EPA come in and start regulating something within the PFAS spectrum that could trigger one of those wells that are critical to the water system, right, to be out of compliance, or it could stay the way it is too.
Okay.
So-
Could we have input from Mark, who our superintendent and DPW director? I'd appreciate their thoughts on this as well as,
I just want to make
Yeah, sure.
one point. If we were not addressing PFAS, we would be here asking $23 million for the Tremont
yeah,
filtration.
Correct.
So it's, the water quality master plan was issued years ago, and we didn't appropriate money for it. Part of the plan, and Tremont does need that investment for filtration. When we're talking about we're in compliance, the recent year for PFOA for Lakeshore was 4.06, 4.92, 4.68, and 3.59. So the last reading at 3.59, which was low capacity and time that the reading was taken, that becomes a 0. So we have over 4, almost 5, over 4, and a 0. You average those up and you say everything's in compliance. I don't want to risk our capacity where Tremont is a highest producer. You don't want to go through this game. We need to do one of the projects, whether it's Depot or Tremont, which is you need to invest $23 million in Tremont anyways, or you do the Damon Millbrook.
David Millbrook, okay, good.
But either way, we should go ahead and do the pilot study for Damon and Millbrook, like we have done for what filtration equipment's needed for Depot and Tremont. But you can't disregard that the investment needs to be made in
I mean,
Tremont.
when you make it really clear, maybe I'm not making myself clear, right? We need to move this project forward. We need to ensure that we deliver water to our residents that is in compliance. I am just having a doubt as to whether Depot Street is the right well. There's other wells that need that work, all right? So I just want to get really clear. We need to advance this project. We need to treat PFAS, right? But we need to do it wisely. The last thing I want to do is build a PFAS plant on Depot Street that never gets turned on.
Well,
Sorry, and then I will shut up now. Anyway, it'd be really good to hear what our experts, our water superintendent and DPW director think
As
of all
well
this.
as the group that's been studying this. I mean,
Yeah,
Mr. Bagley and Tanya
Yeah,
and Bo is
for
here. I
everybody.
think they deserve to be heard.
Well, the only thing I can say is we might get a better picture of what the cost is going to be 3 weeks from now when the rates are presented to the board.
What do you mean by that?
The cost of what, water or
The
the
new-
cost of
the
treatment?
new rates, and we're going to get 2 scenarios. One will be without PFAS and one will be with PFAS. So you'll be able to see the costs.
What do you mean by that, Mark? I don't get it.
We don't understand, Mark. The rates
Mary,
based
do you wanna
on
explain
with
that?
PFAS and without PFAS?
Right.
Why would the rates, the water rate being charged to a customer factor in that?
Because we'd have an added expense.
Oh, I see.
For
You're
the
gonna
PFAS,
add
that
the
has to be
expense
figured in.
of treatment into.
Without treatments, the rates are going to fund the water main work that I need. I have a lot of early 1900s water main that needs to be replaced and cleaned up.
Okay.
And so what,
The basic water rates is what's going to
So
cover that work.
The sneak preview to for 3 weeks is you're going to be presenting 2 water rates. One that would include PFAS remediation and one that would not.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you mind if I expand
Yep.
a little
Go
bit
ahead.
on that? And I know you've got a long line
There's
queued
a,
up
there's a
here.
long line of people behind you.
So with respect to the water sewer rate study, so the town has been working with a third-party consultant called Ref Tellis, and Mark, Sheila, Rainey, and myself have been meeting with the consultant over the course of the last 2 months, putting together all of the data for the rate study. And as we are all well aware, when it comes to generating revenue for this enterprise fund, it is based on the consumption of water. Over the last several years, the enterprise fund has been generating very little or not to a sufficient degree retained earnings out of the rate structure in order to fund the capital improvements that are needed that don't even look at PFAS. So the day-to-day maintenance and improvement of our existing water supply system, our distribution system, has a lot of improvements that in our capital program that need to be done, like lead service line replacements and gooseneck replacements and other water main replacements. So in order to be able to properly operate the enterprise fund and generate sufficient revenues for those capital improvements, let alone our day-to-day operational expenses, we are looking at increasing our water and sewer rates to generate the revenue necessary for that. So we've been working with the consultant. He will be presenting the full rate study to this board on January 27th, and you will be able to see the variables that we've been talking about, and we will be looking at the impact of modifying our rates just for our operating expenses and our known capital infrastructure, and that will be model number 1. And then we will look at model number 2, which drops in the cost of these PFAS improvements. And we haven't even gotten to the slide where we see the cost of these improvements, but using those in our capital program, you'll see the impact on the water rates themselves. Just the existing day-to-day operations and the existing infrastructure improvements that are needed, we are going to see water rate increases in the vicinity of 50 to 60%, potentially. That being said, what happens is what's called demand destruction. So when you increase your rates to those levels, and it will be over a phased-in period of time, depending on when we need to schedule those capital improvements. But what happens is when you increase those rates, you start to destroy the demand or the usage of water. So we fully expect that there is going to be a decrease in consumption. When there's a decrease in consumption, there's a decrease in revenue. And so we need to find a balance where we're going to be generating enough revenue in order to operate our water distribution system. And it all depends on what capital infrastructure improvements we need to build into those rates. So we wanted to get through this presentation tonight of the PFAS projects and the prioritization and separate it from the water rate study, because you need to see what the recommendations are here for this set of capital improvements. And then with that in the back of your mind, when we hear the rate study being presented, you'll see the cost impact, and that will help to drive some of the prioritization that you're going to then need to make as water sewer commissioners based on the recommendations from these folks here tonight. Does that make sense?
Yes. The only other piece here is next week we're closing the warrant. Do we have articles drafted for anything here?
I'm
For one of these, for the project, yeah.
All right. Well, I'll let you get to that,
But that being
that's
said, we could reopen the warrant.
doing like a boom, boom back. you know.
We are. And they're two very important issues, and they go hand in hand. The other point that I do want to make is part of the problem with the town of Duxbury's water billing system is that we are currently semi-annual. And when you're a semi-annual billing structure, you don't get to see the impact of that demand increase or decrease for a very long period of time. So we have an appointment with our software vendor for next week in order to discuss converting to a quarterly billing system. That will not only benefit the town for managing its the consumption and distribution of water, but also for the ratepayers to smooth out paying water bills over 4 periods as opposed. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
So we will be looking at modifying our billing structure to be a quarterly billing system. The hope is that we will be setting revised rates prior to July 1. Ideally, we'd like to set revised rates in the March to April timeframe so that they would then go into effect for the next billing cycle, and then we can start to see the impact of those rates on consumption and be able to better prioritize these particular capital projects that you're hearing about. So there's a lot of moving parts to this.
I'm glad we're doing it, though.
It certainly needs to be done, and we've got a lot of folks working on the various pieces, and it will all come together very soon.
So we haven't actually heard the whole presentation yet.
Yeah, and I'm
although
gonna
we have
let-
a lot of people.
Should we let the president?
Well,
I don't know.
and resume?
Did you want to say something right away, or go right ahead?
Well, basically, everyone's talking about not kicking the can down the road. I would say slow things down. Apply the brakes. Don't stop, but slow things down. There are so many moving pieces here. This is still evolving technology. It's very expensive right now to treat for PFAS. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. Things could change. Something may develop that's less expensive. Typically, things get more expensive over time, but in this case, we don't know for sure. We're still waiting to see what DEP has to say in 2026. We have money from last town meeting. We can still move forward with that money. Again, there's significant rate increases coming down the pipeline, even if PFAS didn't exist. We have projects we have to do. And right now, our 2 wells that are out of compliance are off. So we are not out of compliance. We clearly have an irrigation problem in this town. Water conservation, I am 100% behind that we need to push that and move that forward. Is it going to change everything so that we get to that 65? I'm not sure, but when we're talking about spending up to $150 million, maybe it will. So there's a lot to consider here. Don't stop, but slow things down. So that's essentially my perspective.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sheila.
Does the,
Yeah, I can sit down if you like and let them
I don't want
finish.
you to sit down, but
I didn't
I just
mean that
didn't
in a
know if
mean
you
way.
wanted to wait for them to finish the slides.
Yeah, that's okay.
I actually just want to say is that I think we could show you the slides, but ultimately the last couple of slides I think that Austin was going to present are what we've been talking about. They're the conclusion, and I think we're all touching on parts of it, right? And I think we're all coming from it from different angles with good opinions. And I think, to Sheila's point, I think there's lots of balls in the air across, every, aspect of what's going on, both on PFAS, regulatory compliance, and the rates. And maybe something that would instead of starting a design, maybe you would starting at least the piloting work for Damon, Millbrook, for Depot Tree, for the wells that need that detailed piloting work would be with the funding you have to start that. That is a very long process, both from a duration and permitting experience, which those also don't expire.
Right.
We've just used a pilot study from 2006 for a facility a couple years ago. So there's something that you could do to start, and you could go down the road, and then it still allows you the flexibility to choose whatever project you want to go to once the regulations are solved, you feel some of our demands are. You know, again, just a off-the-cuff idea here, but we mentioned a little bit of that.
For the, hey, could it, just, I'm a lawyer, and maybe there's people at home that don't understand the language use here. What is a piloting program in your world versus in your world?
So this is where Alston's technical expertise comes in better than my level at this point. But no, essentially, Mass DEP requires us to pilot, especially for iron and manganese, and they will start very soon for prior to design is for PFAS design as well. And we have to actually simulate the raw water from the pump from the well going through media, and obviously on a much smaller pilot scale. So we're putting it through just a small, skid of small filters. We have to be there or hire us up to be there and facilitate the work. We have to take water samples at different intervals and essentially show how effective certain media is to treat the water quality that you have in town. And that can be different by well. It could change 100 feet away, right? So we have to do that for each supply. We have to then write a report and a permit to Mass DEP. They then have to review that and submit their approval of that. And then that is the basis. And they essentially allows us to size all the filters, and then from there size the facility and plant. So we can assume what filter size would be for a certain flow rate, et cetera. But there's times that something that may be specific to the water quality that we'll find coming out of a pilot study that Mass DEP will be looking for that will facilitate the final design.
So would you have to do something like that regardless of whether technology changes or our consumption changes or anything like that? Is that a prerequisite to any kind of work we'd have to do down the road?
Yes, yeah. Even now, also, right, Mass DEP is leaning towards starting to have to actually require PFAS piloting, whereas before they were letting us to do it sort of in situ, sort of as a demonstration test once the media was installed, because some of it was emergency work. So yes, it has to be done. We can test different technologies as well. But we usually go to what is tried and true and easiest from an O&M perspective first. And then we also try to leverage what could be new and take up less floor space from a total overall cost.
Is that on the next slide?
The details and filtration, I think it's part of in the report. I don't think it's as detailed in the presentation.
Let's wrap up the slides. I know there's a lot of people that will have questions and comments.
All right, I think we pretty much did it. Let me just flip through my slides here.
Sure.
If you don't, I don't know which one we're on right now. 12. Can you go forward 3, please?
I'm sorry.
2 more, if you don't mind. Okay. This is just a summary of the facilities. As we did schematic engineering. We essentially laid out, we did preliminary surveys at all of these sites. We laid out and did preliminary sizing of all of the treatment facilities to get an idea of what kind of space we're taking up, where things could go. And this is a summary of what those facilities would treat in terms of design capacity, and what sort of treatment on a big scale treatment would they require. So FEMN, that's iron and manganese. As I mentioned earlier, any well that is removing PFAS that has certain levels of iron and manganese would also require that pre-treatment. And iron and manganese is naturally occurring, very common, especially in this region of the United States. So it's just a summary of that. We're looking at the largest facility at the top here for Tremont Depot down to Evergreen. And unless we want more detail on these individual projects, which I don't think we want to do, we can go to the next slide. All right, so I think this is probably the slide that we end with. We've already talked about our conclusions and our recommendations. So I just wanted to kind of put a bow on this. These are the costs that we've been talking about. So big picture, actually let me get to my notes here. Big picture, we're looking at some big numbers, to put it frankly. So Tremont Depot, somewhere in the realm of $40 million. Damon Millbrook, about 43. Going down and down to $5 million for Partridge. The reason for the higher numbers for Tremont Depot, Damon, Lakeshore even, if you look at cost per gallon, is because they require those additional treatment processes. And just to be clear, I know that like the focus of this obviously is PFAS treatment. Those additional treatment processes do improve water quality in town. So it's not necessarily doing something, spending money to get no benefit, just to be clear. So again, as I think Candace pointed out earlier, the Tremont Depot, we previously recommended iron and manganese treatment for that as part of the master plan. So those costs are sort of folded in here as well. And then I'll end on funding. So there are some opportunities that would be that might be available to help fund these projects. You have congressionally directed spending, which we commonly know as earmarks. So this is something that we can do on the state or federal level. The funding is provided in terms of a grant, so it's not a loan. It's actual money in the pocket that erases some of the debt service that would be required to fund the project. And that's usually coordinated through your local delegation, be it at the state or federal level. And obviously, all of that funding and the potential for that funding is at the mercy of lawmakers. And then you have what's called the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund Program. This is a program that takes federally provided funds and is distributed on the state level in the form of low interest loans. So when we're talking low interest, it's 0 to 2%. The 0 is for PFAS and lead and copper replacement projects. Historically, we don't necessarily know how things are going to progress in the future. And PFAS projects can get loans. The loans can help to fund the engineering work prior to construction, which isn't always the case for these kinds of loans. And so we actually initiated this process for Tremont Depot back in July. It was actually just a re-up from the previous year, and it was just in case something happened to try to make sure that some form of funding was available. Though DEP who kind of identifies the projects and determines which projects get funding has not yet told anybody who's getting money yet. And then, finally, the funding is pretty competitive. A lot of PFAS and lead and copper projects are cropping up. Lead and copper, obviously, we just did our inventories this past year to replace lead and copper services throughout the United States. And we're expecting that those projects will start to crop up and be in direct competition with, PFAS treatment projects. And I think, we talked about conclusions and recommendations. And I think
I think
Yes,
it's really
sir.
good, actually. Why don't you put slide number 19 on there? Put slide number 19.
Sure, recommendations.
Yes, please.
Can I ask a clarifying question based on something you just said?
Yes.
All right. If I understood you correctly, the project that you have submitted to the DWSF is for Tremont and Depot?
Correct.
So that's what is been submitted to the intended use plan?
Correct.
So we have not submitted an application for any other well?
No, because at that point, we had already done it in the previous year, so it was simply an update of that previous. It was sort of a low effort, low hanging fruit. If we get the funding, great. If not, it didn't take up much time.
Okay, so then is the next step, is what you're suggesting to identify the next priority project in order to submit a different application to get on the intended use plan?
If depending on the intended schedule of sort of this effort, then if there was another project that happened in 2026 where you would initiate design, then yes, you would think about submitting the project evaluation forms for the next project this year, and it's usually July or August is when those are due.
Okay, so because you have to be approved on the intended use plan in order to access the drinking water state revolving fund. So what that means is that the only project that has been submitted so far that would be eligible for that 0 to 2% loan is the Tremont Depot project.
Okay.
And if we're discussing not pursuing Tremont Depot and pursuing something else, then that would be a new application that would need to get in and be approved in order for us to be able to access the 0 to 2% loan.
Yeah.
If we don't access the low-interest loan, then we'd be potentially looking at conventional borrowing, which would be at a much higher interest rate.
I like these recommendations here, 1, 2, and 3. Maybe Alston, go through them
Sure.
and read them out for everybody.
Thank you, Fernando.
Yeah, I guess real quick before moving on, the state revolving fund funding is, if the project, the recommended or the treatment project that you submit on is intended to solve a compliance issue, it will get funding, but if it is not, then it will not score high enough to receive funding.
Right.
Just to be clear on that. So, for example, if you were to put PFAS treatment at one of the lower PFAS wells, like Evergreen, for example, it would not get funding through that program. Just
Yeah.
So what
for the
about
record.
something like Lakeshore?
Lakeshore, probably,
Yes.
based on the data that we have.
Yeah.
Other than it, and it's troubling me ever since it was mentioned, is that you can have one reading that is slightly below 4 when all other readings on that particular well were well over 4.
Mm-hmm.
And then that skews the numbers so that you're then in compliance. I feel pretty confident that the residents of the town of Duxbury do not want to rely on one abnormal reading to decide whether the drinking water is good for their kids or not. That seems like a really bad way to move forward. If those are if those numbers are being factored in, I think we need to rethink those.
No, just, again, go to slide number 6 and explains it better. So the Lakeshore well does go 3 and then goes over and drops 4, but
Yes.
totally agree with you. It could go back up to 4, right? That's
Yeah, and the way that
that's the
compliance
problem right
will
there.
work.
See, that's the Lakeshore well, the black one.
Yeah.
So depending on the way they're doing it, but we all know that it goes above and beyond the line. So we're going to do something with that one because the next reading could blow it out the water, right? So you don't want to, you can't risk that. The other ones, though, they're pretty constant at around 2 parts per trillion or 1 part per trillion, oscillate around there.
Yeah, I guess.
This
This is taking the average, though, of saying if it
Can you go up
was-
to the microphone, Candace? Sorry.
Because that's where this slide is taking the average for the year.
So, say for Damon, it was 3.69, 3.53, 4.38.
It's per quarter.
and
It's per
3.1.
quarter. It's per quarter. Look at the slide. It's for quarter.
But it's taken the yearly average per quarter. So it's taking, for that year, it's saying 0040. For that quarterly reading, it's taken the last year's averages. That's not the absolute, that's the average reading and counting anything below 4 as 0.
That's fine.
But it's different. Like
That's fine. But it's going to oscillate around the 4 point, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So for Millbrook, it's showing everything looks a lot below 4 as the yearly average, but it's 4.17, 4.59, 3.89, and 3.62.
Okay, so we have to do Millbrook then. Yeah.
No, I'm just saying, but
Yeah, yeah.
that slide is an average of the year and zeroing out anything below 4. So nothing's perfectly in compliance, and I disagree when we're saying we don't have any issues.
Right, when we're saying we're not in compliance, is because those readings throw it below the 4, which then zeroes it out. So it's tricking us into thinking that we're in compliance, that we really have to grapple.
That's EPA's.
I understand that's EPA's, but we haven't, too, as a community, decided what number we want to be at. Are we okay feeding our children, drinking water that is 3 or slightly below 4? I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't think so, but I don't know.
Mr. Chairman, if I can just ask
Yeah.
a
Can
question.
Can we go back to the conclusion? Sorry.
1 second,
Well-
Fernando.
Yeah, sorry. I
Yeah,
interrupted.
let me just ask a question based upon Amy's very important point about the how the number looks. As I look at this slide, that tells me what the PFAS concentration is at the source, right?
Correct.
At the well. So to Amy's point, of course, we're concerned about what it looks like at the tap. So we've got the high and low pressure zones, but within each zone, water from the different wells is mixed and, right? So what can we look at, to the extent you can comment on this, but if, based upon what we know of the source contaminant concentration, if we aggregate all those volumes together, what sort of numbers are we looking at the tap? And I realize it depends on how close you are to a certain well or whatever, but can you give us any color on that?
It's sort of, as you alluded to, a complicated answer because of the nature of where you're taking the sample from. Are you close to a specific well or not? All of the water doesn't mix perfectly together, only in zones where you sort of have potentially a push and pull. So it's hard to say. I think you could take, there's software that allows you to do it, but it's not a simple answer, I guess.
It'll give you an approximation. It'll tell you 30% of the water in this area is coming from this well, 50% is coming from that well. So you can pinpoint it. Just as you know, the fluctuations of what well is turning on and off, what's coming from the storage tanks.
Sure, but there'd be some dilution.
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
Right.
these are all so these are coming out of supplies, but as soon as you got in the system, considering that the 3 highest wells aren't even on, they'll all be generally blended together.
I know.
Can we go to the summary again?
Yeah, I'd like to wrap this up and hear the ask.
Yep.
Okay. So we recommend at minimum 3 things, and I think we've talked about these. The first is to prepare and develop a water conservation plan. This would be in addition to the rate study that's happening. This is something you would look at watering restrictions in the summer, implementing some form of a public education outreach program to help educate people about not just why water conservation is important, but how often do you really need to water? How long should you keep your grass to help minimize watering? Things like that. And we've actually, Ryan alluded to this earlier, EPA released a grant program like 2 weeks ago for almost this exact thing. And so we're helping the DPW pull together an application to hopefully secure some of that funding. That would just be to develop the plan.
Can I ask a question on the water conservation plan, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
So can you provide a little bit more info? What is the plan? Is it, and I guess more specifically, is that something that needs to be particular to Duxbury, or conservation is pretty universal, right, in terms of things you can do in a community like ours?
Yeah.
What would be involved in that sort of thing, and couldn't we just take something off of a shelf?
So I'm not sure. There's a lot of resources from like Massachusetts Water Resources Authority, the MWRA, from DEP, about different techniques or things you can do to help reduce water use. The idea of the plan is to pull together a targeted, not even just like a schedule and certain things to do within a certain amount of time, help to identify funding for, let's say, purchasing a bunch of, water savings kits and things of that nature. So it's all of these things, all these resources exist, but the point of the plan is to help organize them, come up with an idea and a methodology for, actually implementing a lot of those techniques.
For our circumstances.
For your circumstances.
Oh, I see.
So,
okay, thank you.
There are a lot of water systems lose water in the ground and they don't know where it goes. And there's a metric for that. It's called unaccounted for water. That's not an issue as much here in Duxbury as the residential water use. So the water conservation plan would be directed more toward that rather than, leak detection and things like that to help fix leaks.
Thank you.
Rough cost on that?
About $20,000.
Okay.
Second, we recommend proceeding with, and it says here, piloting, design, and permitting for the priority project using the existing available funds from last town meeting. Ryan did propose an alternate that would allow you some more flexibility by proceeding with piloting at 3 different of these facilities. And again, this is a small-scale filtration system just to prove the treatment. And then you could kind of pick up one of those when you're ready and proceed with design there. So you're not necessarily dedicating yourself to one path, but still moving forward.
And again, what's the approximate cost of that? And are you talking about the $1 million that we set aside?
Yep. So I would say without back of the napkin for 3 treatment piloting, for 3 pilot efforts, it would be about 200 to 250 each. So we're looking at 600 to, what is that, 750, and that would be for 3.
Okay.
And that back of the
$1,000
napkin, I hope, is on the high end.
Yeah. And Mary, where would that money come from?
It's from,
I know, but we didn't use it, so you would have to
It was borrowed money, right?
no.
We haven't borrowed it yet. So
Right.
we're borrowing authorization, so we would have to issue debt.
you would have to issue debt.
And the water enterprise would have to have enough funding to cover that debt.
Got it.
In my case, do we need 3? Can we do 2?
Let's see what the Water Enterprise
Yeah.
Fund has.
All right, I mean,
Okay, 3?
And number 3 would be, if you go with number 2 as written here, to consider appropriating the remaining funds for design so that you can, as Ryan said, get something shovel ready, because the intent of the previous appropriation was to get started, but that is likely not the full cost of design. So we understand that the number that we've been using, that we use for estimating design here, is simply a % of the overall construction cost, so it's not necessarily a detailed cost. So it's likely lower than what these numbers are showing, but this is conservative. And big picture, the importance, and this is what we've been talking about, I think, for the last 15, 20 minutes, is it's important that the town focuses on water conservation. I think the rate study, changing rates, proceeding with the water conservation plan, and implementing that plan will help kind of further that end. But we also believe that it's important to at least keep the ball moving forward on one or multiple of these potential treatment projects if, for whatever reason, you're not seeing the results that you want to see from water conservation. Yeah, and Ryan would
Thank
like
you.
to say something.
I just want to make sure we point out that these recommendations are based on maintaining compliance. If you say that you as select board, townspeople are interested in doing PFAS treatment everywhere, then the attack of the projects here could change. So a lot of it is really based upon what you'd like to do on the way forward.
Okay.
We tried to build an efficient approach to save money in the long term and try to see what the impact of not only the upcoming regulations are, the funding mechanisms, and the water conservation efforts, and what kind of impact they make on the water system.
Great.
Thank you.
Mr. Begley from the Water and Advisory Board.
Thank you. Jim Begley, Elm Street, and on the Water Advisory Board for PFAS. In looking at this over the past year, a couple of things become very clear. One, that Duxbury has ignored its infrastructure for water supply over the last 20 years or so and not made the investments that need to be made. Those investments are coming home to us now. A big part of this work is to address those infrastructure issues in our aging infrastructure. The PFAS treatment is not something that's going to go away. It's only going to become more critical going into the future. The state has yet to set their standards. If they do anything, they're going to be lower than what EPA has just come up with. We're looking at situations with our wells where, even though EPA has put in a artificial compliance calculation, in my opinion, looking at what the concentration is that can be seen by a lab, labs can actually see much lower than that reliably and give you good data to make decisions. You can easily go down to 2 and be very confident in that laboratory data to make a decision. None of this is going to improve. It is a situation where you need to address the first priority. You can change your priority, but you need to address whatever becomes first, because to be in compliance when the time comes in a few years with EPA, you have to start doing the work now. Otherwise, you're going to be looking at water shortages in the future. Regardless of the conservation situation, move forward. Don't kick it down the road. And the only way you can move forward and not kick it down the road is to support the town meeting vote for a full project, not just a little bit more design or a little bit more piloting this March. The money that we appropriated last year can be used to fill in the time between now and then, or do this other piloting work, that's fine. But you need to move forward. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Boynton, sorry I skipped you there.
No problem. Bo Boynton, 48 Russell Road, Duxbury Water and Sewer Advisory Board. First, I want to start with some thank yous. I really like the dialogue that's going on. I appreciate every board member. I think you're doing a great job. I think you have great heads. You're thinking about it correctly. I love that you're being creative. For me, just to kind of simplify things, I've been on the Water and Sewer Advisory Board for 10 years. We've always talked about water conservation. I know Amy's been a good advocate for it, but a lot of people in the room have always said, why? Like, why should we conserve water? You know, we're kind of the bottom of this river aquifer, and it all heads into Duxbury Bay. If we don't use it and dump it on our lawns, you know, no one else is downstream of us. I think this is a great why for Duxbury to start conserving water. And Fernando, I'm ready to light a torch with you, and I feel that like you're making a lot of really great points. Brian, your points about why not treat the cleaner sources first and kind of throw away these more contaminated sources. I think that's a bigger question on what Duxbury's goal is. Is Duxbury's goal to be compliant with the EPA and Mass DEP when they come out with the regulations, but they'll most likely be similar? Or is Duxbury's goal to do absolutely everything we can to get as much of this contaminate out of the water as we possibly can? I think there's no wrong answer to that question. I think it's a judgment call. I think a lot of smart people from EPA are, you know, working those regulations and creating them for a reason. If you think about a part per billion, take an Olympic swimming pool, take an eyedropper, drop 1 drop of PFAS into that Olympic swimming pool, and that's your part per billion. So I don't feel that, I don't want to apply my own personal opinion. I'd love Duxbury to make an opinion on whether or not $132 million should be spent or not. But if I was to, you know, I would drink water with 4 parts per trillion. And if the EPA said it was okay, whatever. But I think we need to find an organized way for Duxbury to make that decision. And I think that a lot can be done with water conservation. You know, if you think of the number of dollars that needs to be spent for Duxbury municipally to provide water to irrigate grass in the summer, people could install private irrigation wells that don't need PFAS treatment. They could water their lawns as much as they want, and it's that simple. And then we could take the clean supplies that we have, and people could drink that water. So I just wanted to bring those couple points up, but I really like the dialogue. I really like where everyone is. I want to thank Apex for, as far as they have brought us, they've been really well organized. They've been really open to all these ideas and all this dialogue that's been brought in. They did a lot of work with the site surveys, understanding the sites, analyzing all the data, and standing here today, I feel a lot better than we did through the past couple of years. So I think we're making good progress. Thanks.
All right, thank you.
Sullivan.
Betsy Sullivan, Washington Street Finance Committee. In the scope of the Finance Committee, I did hear that many of these grants and/or loans would be dependent on us meeting the DEP criteria, and I don't claim to be as up to speed as I probably should be on this, but what I did hear was that we do not meet that criteria for all our operating wells. Is that true? So that means at this point in time, just as part of the overall, we would not be eligible for a grant and/or the reduced cost of borrowing, because we do not meet, DEP aside, we're not going to change the DEP and look at it through a scope other than theirs to qualify for these things. We would not, it sounds as though we are not eligible for the grants and/or borrowing based on that criteria.
I think just
And
on
did I
certain
hear
wells.
correctly?
For some of the wells.
For some of the wells.
The depot, the Tremor
But you're
depot.
mixing depot and you're mixing clean water and dirty water, so I would assume, I don't know how that impacts it.
The only way to add treatment for depot is to.
I'm not, but I'm just saying, I don't know how that would be looked at, and I don't think anybody in this room knows how that decision would be made at this juncture. But I think it's an important part, and Amy very, very correctly has brought up, we are meeting all the time on an override. to supply operating costs for, for the town so that we can maintain the structures that we have, work with the facilities that we have, including water. The rates are going to go up on the water just to maintain the systems because, correct me if I'm wrong, 16 years since we went up on the rates.
Yeah.
We used to automatically, back in the Stone Ages, we used to automatically do it every 5 years. I don't know where the wheels came off the bus on that, but, that's caught up with us, obviously. I just want to make sure that we're not selling to the general public that there are grants and there are improved rates or that there is going to be a cost less than what it actually could be if we borrowed or had a project that was close to $150 million. It is a huge price tag coupled with what we need to do this year in order to just maintain the goods and services and employees and all the things that we want Duxbury to operate. Just a thought.
I think that is an incredibly important thing, and I'm a little bit surprised that it wasn't brought up during the presentation, that we wouldn't be eligible for those.
Yes,
It
yeah,
was.
I did
We
mention
weren't.
it.
Oh, I did not hear that.
And
I
to be
thought we
clear,
were
to
0%.
manganese in Massachusetts, it actually by EPA is considered what they call an emerging contaminant. So DEP does take that into account and does favorably score projects that do address manganese issues as well. They don't tend to outscore PFAS projects, so that's why you don't see any manganese-only treatment projects being funded through SRF. But just to kind of be clear, Tremont isn't what I would consider clean.
So was that PEF submitted for manganese, iron, and PFAS? It was submitted for all three?
Yeah, iron and manganese kind of get removed by the same process, so we tend to lump them together.
Can we just go, if you don't mind, can we go look at that? I'm trying to find that famous slide again with the, slide number, the one, the compliance in Duxbury slide. Can you
Number 6?
find that again? Yeah, number 6.
I believe.
So just so I understand the scoring or getting funding, that one right there, right?
Yep.
So say if we wanted to work on the black one, which is the lakeshore well, right? So when we apply for funding, if we would apply the funding in the fourth quarter of 2023, we would have received favorable marks because it's over 4 parts per trillion, right?
In 2023, we did not because there was no EPA final rule.
Oh, well, okay, sorry. Okay. When did we get it? So in the Q2 24, we got it? No, we didn't, did we?
Yeah, quarter 2. Wasn't that when it came out?
Yeah.
So you're talking about the black line?
Yeah, the black line.
The
We would have
lakeshore.
received it in 2Q 2024, but we wouldn't receive it in Q3 2024. Is that what we were saying?
Yes, right.
It all depends. Yeah. That's kind of strange, right? Because there have been historical readings above that.
That was where the 3.59 became a 0.
I know, I understand that. It's just that. That's how it works, huh? Okay.
May I,
All right, thank
Jump-
you.
so just to kind of tighten this up here, we've been at it for a couple hours of the meeting. What is the warrant article that's being proposed? Do we have that written? Is there one on this
Go ahead.
related to this presentation?
We did draft 2 warrant articles. I
Okay.
believe. So one was for the continue the design and construction of the priority well, and there was a second one for the pilot study. We can combine it all into one and say it's water quality improvement. So one thing we can do as the next step with the working group, I recommend that we go back and retake a look at the prioritization. Our criteria was depot was needed for capacity. So if the water department's now saying, consider that a lower priority, let's go back through, we went through a lot of discussion. It's likely that the Damon Millbrook will come out as needing that. Regardless, I think we definitely should move forward on the pilot study for the 5 wells that are borderline or out of compliance. We'll firm up what those costs would be. One thing that we were recommending to move forward on, continuing the design and construction, was to not have a gap. So if we started in January with the design right now, it would be complete and ready Q1 of 2029, just in time for meeting the regulation deadline. So that's just for the the first priority project. So that's why we were pushing forward. So if there's other wells that come up in the priority, if we're going to come up with the assumption that we're going to have guaranteed reduction in water usage during the summer, and we don't need depot if another well is out of service, then that's a different scenario that we were working with. We were saying that it's needed for capacity. We can go back and take a look at that and work out the timeline of doing the pilot study, when that would be done and when we would need additional money. But minimum, it was noted that $2 million is needed for 2025 engineering for the priority project.
Okay.
Okay. Now, the water conservation plan. What's the plan for that?
Well, we didn't have that.
I'm
We
not
can-
trying to be too flip here. Do we have funding for it? Or did we get authorization for that?
You said you guys were applying for a grant for that. So
Yeah.
there is no funding
Okay.
identified for that right now, no.
Yeah.
So I guess give us a couple of weeks to go
Okay.
back. We have a draft warrant article that's for water quality improvements. And it's to continue the design and construction. So whether
Okay.
we have one warrant article or two to request the pilot study, I would say we can approach it with two separate ones, pilot study only, but risking completing the project by the regulation deadline.
Okay, so, and Rainey, what do you need from,
I have
and
to look
when?
and see what I have. I haven't checked it since December 23rd, so I'll have to look. I'll check
Now,
tomorrow.
where we're closing it next week,
It won't be a problem.
it won't be a problem?
No.
Okay. All right, I just want to make sure everybody kind of knows.
Yeah, Candace and I find each other very easily, and we send the warrant article back and forth to make sure we like it.
Right.
Yeah,
And
there won't be
we'd
a
want to
problem.
keep two, one for just doing the design and pilot study.
I'm going to verify everything with you tomorrow.
Okay.
To make sure I've got the right things.
I'm sorry, Mike. I just have one quick question. Of
course.
It's something I read, and I'm jet lagged, so I might have, got it wrong. Does the clock for compliance, is it uniform across the whole state, or does it start ticking when a well is determined to be out of compliance?
It's a good Apex question, or somebody question.
That's why I was looking at them.
Yeah.
Sorry, not that,
It started ticking April of 2020.
for the ones that were out of compliance, but anyway,
Yeah.
this gentleman.
Yes, so the clock starts ticking toward compliance being required. At the drop of the hat, April 2029 is when compliance, any well would need to be in compliance. And so from that point forward, so what you're asking is
I'm asking that
for the average?
Nope,
No.
I'm asking that, say a well is now deemed by the DEP to be in compliance because of their cockamamie way of determining that. And in 2028, a well is then, because we've been monitoring these, I think the one unbelievably fabulous thing from this is that we will no doubt continue to monitor these
Correct.
wells so that we have data that can support any action that we take. But say in 2028, Tremont, which is clean now, or for lack of a better word, all of a sudden then rises above the threshold of 4. Would it then have to be mediated in a year, or would the clock start ticking for a period of time for mediation?
So that's something that we'd have to work out with the state. Essentially, so in 2028, if you were to exceed 4 parts per trillion,
In a
you
well.
would not be out of compliance because compliance starts in 2029, to be clear. If you go out of compliance, you either turn the well off or you receive, it's either a notice of noncompliance or something from the state. And then you work with the state to address that problem. You come up with a plan for addressing and rectifying that issue. This happened when we did 20 parts per trillion PFAS-6 back in 2020. And it's something that has happened to various communities where they couldn't afford to take supplies offline because they wouldn't be able to meet demand. So DEP allowed them to put up, filter stations at the DPW while they, went underway for design, permitting, construction for various facilities.
So what I'm hearing you say, though, is that in order to start from square one, like, it's bad, we need to fix it, it's like a 4 or 5 year process, yeah?
About that, yeah.
So in theory, we would be able to work with the state over that 4 or 5 years to come into compliance without having them come down and turn off the water.
In theory, they might ask you to make it happen faster.
But it's not going to be the 29. It's not going to be 29. It's not going to be a year. I'm just saying, they're going to give us a reasonable amount of time. If
But I
something
think-
goes wrong
I think
with
we're
these
missing-
wells, they will give us a reasonable amount of time for remediation.
What really,
That's right from a financial aspect, but we are knowingly
Drinking
supplying
water.
our residents with
Fernando,
contaminated
I'm a
water.
one-trick pony. I look at it from that.
Well, I understand. Yeah, and you're quite right. However, at that point, we, basically, like we know,
Nobody wants it.
nobody wants it, right? That Millbrook well, that Lakeshore well, that I bet you the next reading is going to be above the 4 parts per trillion.
Right.
It will be.
And I totally get it, but I just don't want people to think that
Yeah.
the state's gonna come down and turn off our water if we don't have this done.
No,
There was one town.
Done that, they have done that.
But I understand if we're out of compliance, right? I'm just trying to get the numbers straight in my head and the timelines, that's all.
As we offer, you have to have emergency treatment.
All right.
You'd have to do
Appreciate it, guys.
something. Yeah,
I
thank you.
think we have an excellent roadmap here. Do you have one, do you just,
Bottled
Just want
water.
to put, I think I have
Signaling
something
me.
to put a bow on this that I think will
Thank you.
hopefully bring all this together, Mr. Chairs. It seems like we have a decision, and it's our job to provide you with that input and the taxpayers and the ratepayers. And I feel like we have a compliance highway and we have treatment everywhere highway, right? And for you to understand the costs associated with each of those aspects, I think coming back out of Candace's comments about, say, that as we work on a draft, we could provide those 2 avenues with cost, but also assume a certain % reduction of consumption in summer demands. Again, as assumption, we could say 10%, 25%,
Yeah.
and provide costs of which wells would have to be done,
There we go.
or don't have to be done if you meet a certain threshold, and then that could give you an understanding of the cost for each avenue at the next.
but
That
for
would be
me,
perfect.
as long as that does not impede moving forward, we need to be moving forward. The residents gave us money to move forward with some of these projects. We need to be doing that. And I don't want to be dragging feet and doing more and more studies that we know we have a problem, let's fix it.
Everything that Candace has said tonight for moving forward with has to be done as the first step for these facilities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we're all in complete alignment. We have to move this puppy forward.
Question, Mr. Chairman. I know that we're trying to get done here, but I want to make sure I've got my notes straight here. So, Candace, on your memo to us, with the 3 recommendations, the first was the conservation plan, which I think we're all behind.
Yeah.
The second was the design of the priority project. That's where I want to ask the question. Through our discussion tonight, do I understand correctly that we're going to be going back to the drawing board to a certain extent on what the priority wells are going to be, and that they will not include Depot and Partridge?
They won't include Partridge. I'm not sure about Depot.
Depot and Tremont were.
Correct. We can go through an assessment whether Depot can be taken off. It was always saying we need that no matter what for capacity. If we assume a 10% reduction and it's still needed, then it stays on.
Okay, great, thank you, that's my only question.
okay, great. Thank you very much. This is a lot of work. And thank you to everybody for coming tonight and assisting with this conversation. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Yes, we have to declare various surplus items for.
No, I meant for
No, we have
Water
to
and Sewer
close
Commission.
it.
Oh, no, we have to get out of this, I forgot.
Please.
You wanted to say
I-
something?
Oh,
Should we do the surplus vote? No.
We can do that.
Melissa wanted to say something.
Melissa, yeah.
Melissa Rosenblatt, West Street, yeah, I'm here. No, I think everything's been covered
Okay.
very well. And I agree, moving things forward, if we're going to do it, just keep going because the competition for these loans is just going to
Get worse.
increase dramatically over the next few years. Competition for loans, equipment, engineering services. So the more we can just keep it moving incrementally. And I think the point that Betsy made that, we do need to focus on compliance because that's where the money is available for us, right? So the other wells, no matter how EPA is deciding to do the calculations, if it meets compliance, the state is not going to loan us money to take care of that problem. You have a lot of unknowns. There's a lot of things that are just not clear at this point. With the new administration, I hate to throw that out there, but other things could happen. This can be delayed. The timeline for implementation could be delayed. We may have more time, but that's a complete unknown at this point. So
So we're just drinking
there's a
bad
lot,
water
and
longer.
I guess we will be looking at it again.
Thank you,
All right,
Melissa.
thank you, Melissa.
I move that the board adjourn their meeting as Water and Sewer Commissioners and reconvene as a Select Board. Requires a roll call.
second.
Fernando, aye.
Brian, aye.
Michael, aye.
Amy, aye.
Cindy, aye.
All right. Next vote, we're going left to right, promise.
We don't care.
All right.
That's something I
God,
really.
Declaration of
Done
surplus items by the DPW. Mr. Jim Savonin, Manager of Lands and Natural Resources, is requesting the Select Board declare as surplus the following items. Before I read them off, I want to make sure we don't have to read them off a second time. I can read them. All right. Old number 27, a one-ton dump truck replaced with capital. John Deere 4600 with backhoe. Toro snowblower. An old Arian snowblower. A Pecoyer spreader. Bobcat stump grinder. A Bobcat broom. Vicon fertilized spreader with extra hopper. Toro 660 aerator. Snapper push mower. Honda push mower. Three Little Wonder push blowers. Hurricane stand-up blower for parts. A 13-foot Boston Whaler with trailer. A 25 HP Suzuki outboard motor. Weather port shelter. Old piano at Tarkiln, that'll be junk, or is junk. An old Johnson chainsaw at Delano Barn, and an old Husqvarna chainsaw at Delano Barn.
Nice job, Mike.
All right. I'm happy to offer a motion.
Please.
I move to declare the surplus items as listed on it says the email from the DPW, but as the chair just read, in order to allow these items to be disposed of, sold, auctioned, or donated, all in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 30B, and town's rules and regulations, with the proceeds to go to the general fund.
And second, please.
Second.
Any discussion, questions? I will take a vote. Oh, go right ahead.
Jim Savonin's on, if anybody has any questions.
Jim, thanks for holding on for, I don't know how many hours here, a couple hours. I appreciate it.
I have no
No worries
questions.
at all. Thank you all.
All right.
Looks like somebody's going to have room in the shed.
Yeah, this is a,
That's what we're trying for, yes.
There you go.
Well, hopefully, Jim, you get enough money to buy some good stuff.
Well, it will go right back to general fund, so let me know.
Okay, all right.
So you have a motion?
motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
All right, you too. All right. Moving on, we have a town manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very quickly, only one thing to provide an update on, and that's with regard to Phase 3A of the Powder Point Bridge repairs. This morning, Sheila hosted the pre-construction meeting for that project. And I just wanted to let you all know, and the public, of course, that the Powder Point Bridge will be closed on Monday, January 20th until the target date is well before it, but the worst-case scenario is March 31st, 2025. It mirrors what we've had to do in the last couple of years when we've done the piling replacements. We'll have the appropriate signage out in the message board so that everybody knows that it'll be closed. So
I'm sorry, Rainey.
Forgive me, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
The Powder Point Bridge will be closed on Monday, January 20th, until March 31st. We anticipate that it'll be reopened before that date, but that's what the contractor has provided us with.
Will it be closed for pedestrian passage?
Yes,
Everything?
vehicular and pedestrian.
Vehicular and pedestrian, thank you.
We've done this in the past
Yep.
to allow for the contractor to be able to get done more quickly.
Yep.
And because of the extent of the piling replacement project.
You'll have to walk around to Marshfield.
Yes. Nice little 4-mile stroll.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my
So,
report.
and I'm glad Betsy's here too. What is the agenda for Thursday night? I know we had discussed in the past.
The Finance Committee is going to begin their review of what will essentially be Article 5B, which is the override article.
Okay. Do you want to elaborate on I don't want to
So
step on your toes.
I've been thinking about this and the best way to use our time.
Yeah.
And this is obviously a request. I feel like we should use the town meeting method. So Mary is generously providing us with something that is similar to the omnibus listing out and breaking out additional columns of information as to the increases would accommodate reinstatement, any new positions, or just general overhead costs, or any change in venue that would drive additional costs. So what I would like to do to kind of keep it down to a dull roar, because, and I'm the biggest sinner in the bunch going down a rabbit hole, but I want to keep it moving. And what I'd like to do is go through the omnibus budget with you all and ask you if for you to vote along with the Finance Committee as far as holds on any line that you feel that you have an objection to. So, we're looking at travel to the moon line item, and there's an increase in that, and you feel as though you have questions or you have concerns or whatever, hold, great, keep going. So we can get through the entire budget, have then boiled it down to the items that need some additional attention. I would then ask the folks that have issued the hold, what are your objections? What is your area of concern? That way we can either have the department head come back, we can ask Mary, we can do whatever we need to do to address the concern. If it's a small portion of the budget, maybe we can even address it right away. If not, we'll get you the answers. What this is going to mean, because I think that I was away, as some of you know, but when I got back, I got a whole dose of what had been going on while I was out of country. And the overwhelming concern seemed to be why is this, why is that? So the sooner the Finance Committee can deliver their recommendations to you, and you hopefully will either accept them or come back with whatever your decision would be. The sooner we can get a number that we can all stand by, the sooner we can then go out to the public and explain what it is we're trying to accomplish. The schools have accomplished this. They've done their part. I don't really think there's going to be a lot of work unless you all have questions for the schools. But on the town side, with the varying departments, let's get through it. Let's address any concerns that you might have, come to consensus, so that we can then go to the community and say, this is our real needs budget, this is what we've all agreed to. And as I've said before, I'm willing to go out at that point if somebody has a meeting with a group, or if somebody has a community meeting, whatever. I'm happy to, I'm thick-skinned, it's fine. I can go out and explain where our rationale is due to our conversations. What'll also involve, and I know you're going to love this, but Fernando's used to meeting twice a week because he was on Finance Committee. We're going to be asking you all to come back on Thursday nights to meet with us until we can get to that resolve. So this week will be a Thursday night, and then the following week, Thursday, until we can get to resolve. We are willing to schedule department heads to come back in to answer your questions. We're going to give us some time to get some answers for whatever your concerns are so that we can, with a clear heart, have a consensus and have an understanding that this is the number that we need.
Is there going to be an opportunity, these are published meetings.
Oh, there is, well, yeah, wide open.
Wide open, and we're going to have the opportunity for people to provide comment and input?
So, yes, I always feel that when we have open and we have the public coming in, that we have an agenda, we have work to accomplish, and I am happy to have the public speak, but it would be at the end of the meeting. I don't want to, again, rabbit hole, we get hijacked. Not that anybody's trying to hijack us, but the conversation then
Right.
can go down another avenue.
Yep.
We're going to get our agenda done, which would be, as I have described. We will then have a very clear agenda as to the departments in question and what will be, when they will be taking place, and then absolutely hearing from the public. This is all about the public understanding what we're trying to accomplish and being supportive.
Yep.
So if that is okay for you, you know, if you've got a bridge game on Thursday nights, oops, sorry about that, but we meet on Tuesday and Thursday, and I'd rather stick to our schedule if I could.
I have some other
So
questions, but I want to
just-
let Mrs. McDonough.
Yep, no, I'm done.
So just, first of all, I think there'll be a lot of holds. I don't think that it should be a hold just because of an objection to something. I think that we all need to understand. You're going to have questions. We need to understand what, you know,
Well, we've
is
been
all
working on
involved.
it for months, so we do understand it, so maybe we can help you get through that.
And this is a new budget that some of us were at the meeting that
Sure.
you had missed, and we did hear, and we, you know, I think we're going to have questions. I don't think that those should be necessarily seen as objections right off the bat. I think that they are
Did I
gonna
say
be-
objection?
You did.
I'm
You
sorry.
were I think that there are holds, and I think that there's going to be a lot of those holds, because I think we have to understand where every dollar is being proposed to go to.
Sure.
I also think the location, if we're doing it at the senior center, that is a problematic room for these big meetings. It does not televise well. The audio at home on these meetings is very difficult. I think people coming in, I don't know if there can be a consideration for a different location.
We don't, what would you suggest?
This room, it's,
The Mary room at the library.
well, this room for television.
I haven't got a horse in the race on where we meet. We suggested the Ellison because we usually meet at
allows
the
the
senior
biggest
center
crowd.
and it was available.
It's just unfortunate that the, oh,
It's going to be recorded but not televised.
Mm-hmm.
It's not live stream, but it will be recorded and it will be, you know, we can only do what we can do here. I don't care if it's live streamed, it does make a bit of difference to me, but
it seems
from
to
what
me
I've got.
with issues as big as these, we should make as much of an effort as we possibly can
Well,
to
that's why it's
reach.
being recorded, Amy. I mean,
I understand
I'm
that.
not-
I'm just
we're
suggesting
not
that
going to be
maybe
able
we-
to get to questions that are being, you know, people that are sitting home and coming in, and if they're there, they'll get their questions answered.
Again,
And I'm happy that if
Yeah.
it's, you know, as
So-
many people
I
come,
agree with,
please.
I agree with Amy's concern about how do we get the public to engage, right?
They attend.
No, come on, you know that's not easy, right?
Well, they can watch it on Zoom, like they could watch it on
Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying. It's very difficult to watch
I've tried
those meetings
to-
on Zoom that are held in that particular room. The audio is notoriously difficult.
And we've had terrible.
In the Ellison room, you can't hear. Sometimes they use that owl thing, sometimes
But we've had a terrible time, as you know, at the senior center in the room that we commonly meet in with Zoom.
Again, I don't
Yeah.
Wait,
particularly have
we don't use the
Huh?
we don't use
That
the
might be
owl in
user
the
error.
Ellison room.
Rainey, I'm just, go back
We
and
use
try to
the
watch
PAC
some of
TV in
those
the-
meetings.
We use
You
the
can't
PAC TV in
hear.
the big meeting, in the
Wait,
Ellison room.
wait. So are we going to have PAC-TV on Thursdays?
No,
Okay.
no,
we
what I'm
don't.
saying,
We've only scheduled one so far. with
I'm
the
just trying to give them a
expectation
heads up for their
Yeah,
schedule.
that's all I asked, yeah. And I
I want
think
to
this
make
is a
sure
point
that
well
the
taken.
selectmen know that this is going to continue till we get to the end. It might not be 4 meetings, it might be 2, 3, who knows? But we
yeah,
are
no,
going to
it's fine.
get to the end so that we can present to the town what we all believe is the correct answer.
And I think,
I like it. We need to do it. And
Yep.
my concern is how do we engage? How do we give the public the opportunity to understand? Right. I've attended Zoom meetings remotely with the finance committee. It's difficult.
Yeah.
People have it's lots of conversations and all
Mm-hmm.
like it is difficult. I agree with Amy. So I'm thinking, how can let's have this first meeting,
Sure.
but then thereafter, if we're going to have multiple meetings after this, and more than likely we are. I'm sure we'll have the police there, we'll have the fire there. It'd be great to have people actually listen to those conversations, understand what the issues that the fire the chiefs are facing, and such that how do we communicate better? How do we engage the public
I think
better?
that the solve that you're saying, Fernando, is that they're there. They're not listening to it remotely, that they're there,
Yeah.
which the Ellison room will be fine for that. But I also understand what you're saying, Amy, that it is difficult for folks to get the nuance of what's being discussed if they're only looking at it through Zoom or even watching the school committee meetings is difficult because you can't hear. The best way for people to engage in this is to show up. And it's unfortunate, but that is
not
the
possible.
truth. And if you have another place for us to meet, I'm open to it. I
and
don't
that's,
care.
the show up is why I asked this.
Sure.
And it's important, I think, because there's a whole bunch of different mediums of people trying to advocate or
Yeah.
provide information on the web. And it is, I want to make sure people know what they're showing up for, what they're like leaving their kids for, or whatever they're setting aside to show up to a meeting. So this is great. We know that Thursdays for a while here, we're going to be discussing the budget. Next Tuesday, are you just doing CPC?
We're having CPC come and we're going to be reviewing the CPC articles, yes.
So not the,
And that will be just our regular communication with the public and that would, but these budget conversations
will be on Thursdays.
will be on Thursdays because I think that at this juncture, what I read, and, thanks to Suzanne, I felt as though I got caught up, is that people want to know what the number is and why the number is.
Right.
And
That happened,
the only,
yeah.
and it is not going to benefit the public if the finance committee discusses it amongst ourselves, comes to a decision, and then you all have to pick it up when we're done. Let's do it together.
Yeah, no.
And
Sorry.
so another engagement piece. I just touched on it, how there's people floating stuff
Yes,
all over.
I'm getting emails
yeah.
from what looks like a very,
Yeah, so there's people that are sending things, there's people that set up websites.
well, it
A
looks
lot
like
of
it's coming from the
misinformation out there.
town.
When
It appears like it's coming from the town, these
What
things that I'm
can-
getting. It's
Can
troublesome.
you forward them to us so we can see them?
Yes.
What can we expect from the town side for a place for people to go and watch these
Yeah.
replays or check things that are attached, so they don't have to go from like the Sustainable Task Force to the Finance Committee agenda to the.
We're putting it on the front page.
Okay, and that was my question.
So there'll be a link.
When can we expect that, or when can the public expect
It's
that?
imminent.
I just,
I'm not
there's some
being
people
coy,
that are
I'm just-
ahead of us, and they're already
It's
pitching
okay.
their case.
That's okay.
The
Yes.
fallback is that which we don't want to be in, right? Is that this doesn't get approved because of lack of information, misinformation, stories, right? So we need to get this right. And how do we communicate and engage with the community such that they have an informed vote at the annual town meeting and thereafter 2 weeks later? So that's why I'm asking is.
And I agree
how do
with
we
you
ensure
100%,
that?
but that means that once we have determined this number and the number that we choose to stand by, I'm prepared, and I think most of you, I know you all, are prepared to go to the public. So if somebody, and if a group wants us to go and talk to them and meet them where they are, you all, well, Amy certainly does, and Cindy, when we were doing the library, 3 years it failed, right? Until they went to people and they spoke to them and explained their position. If this is something that we have chosen to do, and I'm not going to, if this is something that we've chosen to do, then we will be able to have these meetings, we will open them to the public, we will advertise, we will print agendas. But if you want them to be knowledgeable, then we need to be prepared to go to them. Because I have seen it in the last number of town meetings, blows my mind, the MBTA. I mean, there was so much press, so many meetings, so much conversation in local and national, statewide newspapers, and yet the information that was being brought forward at that meeting was completely misrepresenting the reality of the situation. So that is why, after conversations with Rainey and with Mary, this is how we're going to proceed so that we can get X plus Y equals,
Well,
and then have the meeting and then go to them as well. I'm sorry, Amy, what?
No, don't be sorry. I'm hearing what Fernando's saying, and I'm very much on the same page. I feel a big desire to try to create a situation where the public can hear the conversations and understand. What I'm hearing from you is a scenario in which, we hash out the information and come up with a number that we all stand behind and then go out and advocate for. I am not certain that will occur. I think that we come at this from different angles and different areas of concern, and in the perfect world that may be. Maybe we will get to
There's always going to
some
be
number
minority
where
opinions.
where there will be, but I'm not sure that that's that realistic. I think that we have to set up meetings and venues that are as user-friendly to the public as possible, and whether that means them welcoming them in a room big enough, but also holding the meetings in a room that can accommodate at least audio, for goodness sake. You've got to be able to hear us.
The Ellison, that's the Ellison room, is that downstairs room, the big one, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not the one where they meet normally.
It's not the one upstairs.
Oh,
It's
no.
the one.
Correct.
So what terms of audio visual can we
We will work
install?
that out.
You'll work that out.
We're going to figure that out. The board does not need to worry about that.
We can only use what we have.
We'll find.
And that's
Alright.
why
PAC
it's
TV
going
was
to be
not available
important
this Thursday,
that
but we'll
as
find
time
out
goes
out
on,
when
Amy,
there's-
that we go to the people
We'll
as
make
well.
it happen. We'll figure something out.
And to be clear,
do.
just because my order of worship is agenda items first and then public comment, that doesn't mean that public comment will not take place. If people have come there and they've got something to say respectfully, and I will not have, disrespect for anybody, whether they're for or against it in that room. I think that is, remember how we used to say Duxbury could disagree without being disagreeable? Well, I want to bring that back a little bit. And, but they will be heard. And then we will go from there. It's not going to be, it's going to be messy. It is what it is. It's going to be messy, but I think that we can get the conversation and bring the conversation to people if they're willing to listen. And if they're not willing to listen, there's nothing that we're going to do that will help.
Amy, listen to our town manager. Just repeat what you told me.
We'll take care of it.
Okay, that's good. And
PAC TV will not be there this Thursday. It's too short a notice.
Too short a notice.
We'll get it
However,
figured out.
We'll figure it out.
All right.
That's what we do.
All right.
We had a member of the public that's did you want to say something? You
I'm
just
sorry, I was just going to suggest 2 rooms, that's all.
Oh, okay.
You know
hold
the
a can with a
smaller
string.
auditorium at the high
Right.
school?
You just
Where
you
you
have to
did
say.
where you
If
did
it-
your PFAS thing.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Sue Schofield, James Road. I was just, I hold a lot of meetings at the Mary Room, and that's worked out really well. that has a pretty good capacity. But I think these informational meetings are a great idea to build consensus, to educate the public, because I agree. I mean, I've gone to town meetings, I hold. But I mean, I understand we need to move processes along and, you know, agree to disagree in a very respectful manner. You know, money's it's a hard subject.
Yeah.
You know, but the town has to provide services. So whatever we can do to educate people and to get them to show up and get educated before town meeting, to move the town meeting along.
Yeah.
That would only benefit everybody. So like that smaller room at the PAC, I think there was an MBTA meeting there. And to get people comfortable for coming out and asking questions and learning and get educated. But I want to thank you all for all your time, countless meetings that you do, and the hours and decades of service that some people have provided to this town. So thank you.
All right, thank you.
Excellent. Committee appointments and resignations.
I move that the Duxbury Select Board appoint the following individuals to the PowerPoint.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, do you mind, I think some context, can I share some context on the selection and why we chose, do you mind?
Yeah, please. Yeah,
Is that
actually.
okay? This is.
Absolutely.
Sorry, if
No,
you don't
yeah,
mind.
I agree with you.
All right, thank you. So the notice went out for folks to show interest in to join the PowerPoint Bridge Advisory Committee. And so we received a total of 10 talent banks. Interview committee was established with Fred Weiler Sr., Sheila Skarsky, and myself. The criteria we used for looking at the 10 talent banks and selecting which ones we're going to interview was basically we looked at the scope of and the charge of the committee, but more importantly we looked at what criteria that we would use for selection, right? So the scope of the task and experience or specialized knowledge in the following subject matters. So engineering, architecture, transportation planning, bridge construction, multimodal transportation planning, marine engineering, coastal resiliency planning, local history, or relevant related experience. So that was the criteria we used when we looked at the 10 talent banks forms. So we did that, and it was great that people put their names forward, so we want to thank them for doing that. So based on that criteria for selection, out of the 10 talent banks, we selected 8. 8 interviews. And at the end of that process, the interview committee, the three of us were unanimous in selecting the following candidates. So that was Paul Brogner, David Enriquez, Ed Mayo, Kerry Kozlowski, and Cindy Julius. So the combined skill set, when you look at that skill set that these folks bring, is very powerful, right? They are engineers, both civil and mechanical engineers. There's an architect. We have obviously the chair of the historical commission on the board with Ed Mayo, but most importantly, all have experience working either in or with state and or federal organizations. So this is a pretty powerful committee that has been that have volunteered and have been put together. So I recognize that they have a tough task ahead of them. There's expectations on both sides. I'm sure everybody wants the PowerPoint bridge built again, but I know the DOT, they're spending their money, they're going to have a different opinion. These guys, they've got a tough job being in the middle, so to speak. So I'd like to thank not only Paul, David, Ed, Kerry, and Cindy, but all of the applicants for their time and commitment to the town. So thank you very much for doing that, and that's how we selected the committee.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
to the
you,
committee for all
Fernando.
that hard work.
No problem. Thank you.
All right.
With that said, I move that the Duxbury Select Board appoint the following individuals to the PowerPoint Bridge Advisory Committee for a term ending June 30, 2028. Paul Brogna, David Enriquez, Ed Mayo, Kerry Kozlowski, and Cindy Julius.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
I would like to say that Cindy Julius was here for the whole meeting up until about 10 minutes ago. And
Is that right?
And so, but
Well,
she,
so
so
she
it
was
was
at the
nice
back
of,
there.
She
it was
wanted to
nice
be
of her to
appointed.
be here.
Oh, by the way, Cindy is pretty impressive with the work that she's been doing at the with Holtec and looking after their maintenance aspect. But she also rides the Ducati Monster, which I was most impressed with. So
The what?
Oh,
I've been a fellow Ducarista myself. It was pretty cool.
She runs what?
She rides a Ducati Monster motorcycle.
Oh, she rides a Ducati Monster motorcycle.
Yeah,
Well,
cool.
Excellent.
Following boards and committees have
Pretty impressive.
available seats. The following have one seat each: Coastal Resiliency Task Force, Design Review Board, Cultural Council, Economic Advisory Committee, Highway Safety Committee, Municipal Commission on Disabilities, and Nuclear Advisory Committee. The following committee has two seats: Alternative Energy Committee. If anyone is interested in volunteering on a board of or a committee, you're encouraged to fill out a talent bank form, which can be found on the town's website under the Forms and Documents tab.
Thank you very much, Brian. We have a couple of one-day liquor licenses, one for January 10th. That's the Helen Bumpus Gallery for an artist reception on Friday, January 10th, from 5:30 to 7 p.m. At the gallery at 77 Alden Street. I will take a motion.
I move that Mr. David Murphy, as a representative of the Helen Bumpus Gallery, is granted a one-day wine and malt license for their artist reception on Friday, January 10, 2025, from 5:30 p.m. to 7 p.m. at the Helen Bumpus Gallery, 77 Alden Street, Duxbury, contingent upon the conditions of the license.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. The second one. Trying to
Same
find
people, different date.
Yeah, where is it?
It's right here.
Oh, yeah. This is for Friday, March 7th, from 5:30 to 7. And it is also a,
Artist reception.
correct, and this is for serving wine at the opening reception from 5:50 to 7 p.m. We'll take a motion.
I move that Mr. David Murphy, as a representative of the Helen Bumpus Gallery, is granted a one-day wine and malt license for their artist reception on Friday, March 7, 2025, from 5:30 p.m. to 7 p.m. at the Helen Bumpus Gallery, 77 Alden Street, Duxbury, contingent upon the conditions of the license.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, we have some minutes, open session minutes from October 28th, and then from February 12th of 2024.
I don't recall receiving those. Did we get those?
We did get them. They're part of the
We did?
packet, I
Can we
think.
do them another night?
We'll do them another night.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
let's-
Yeah, let's do that.
That's
Perfect.
fine. All right, we have announcements.
We have announcements, all right.
Yeah.
Number one, waiting list for commercial mussel and razor clam licenses. Just a reminder that individuals on the waiting list for commercial mussel and razor clam licenses must renew their application annually within the month of January. That's this month. Sign-up sheets are posted in the Select Board's office. Number two, 2025 dog licenses. 2024 dog licenses expired on December 31st.
Oh, no.
A mail-in renewal form will be included with the annual census for those wishing to renew a dog license by mail. Licenses may also be purchased at the town clerk's office or by using the online ordering system. A link to the online payment center can be found on the town's website at town.duxbury.ma.us. Dog licenses are $17 for intact animals and $12 for spayed or neutered animals, and free to pet owners aged 70 or older. And just a point to share, Mr. Chairman, this language said that the mail-in renewal will be included in the census. I have not yet received my census. I don't know if
Oh, I have
you
not.
folks have.
They're in the process of.
Okay. So if you have not received it yet, it's coming. All right. Number three, 2025 Duxbury dog walking permits. Dog walking permits are required to take your dog on the town of Duxbury / conservation land and the beach. Resident dogs must first be licensed with the town in order to obtain a dog walking permit. Dog walking permits are currently $10 per dog and free to pet owners age 70 or older. Number four, census. The 2025 annual town census will be mailed in the coming weeks. Please take a moment to sign the form, making changes as necessary, and return it to the town clerk's office. This information will be used to compile the annual street list. No voter can be added to the voting rolls using the census. To register to vote, please visit the office to complete a voter registration card or register online at sec.state.ma.us. Per Mass General Law, failure to return the census shall result in the removal from the active voting list. Number 5 of 7, announcements. Nomination papers for town election. The following offices will be on the ballot for March 8th, 2025 town election. 1 select board member for a term of 3 years. 1 assessor for the term of 3 years. 2 school committee members for the term of 3 years. 1 planning board member for the term of 5 years. And 1 planning board member for the unexpired term of 2 years. 2 library trustees for the term of 3 years. And 1 Duxbury Housing Authority for a term of 5 years. Nomination papers are available in the town clerk's office and are due back to the town clerk by Friday, January 31st, 2025 at 5 p.m. A candidate must obtain 50 signatures certified by the town clerk to appear on the ballot. Is there
Did
something
you
else?
say something about a moderator?
Add moderator too, 1 moderator.
One
That's why I
moderator.
Get the moderator.
Yeah.
Yep.
what's-
And 1 moderator for the term of 1 year. 3?
3-year term.
Yep.
I thought moderators ran every year.
No, changed to 3.
When did that change?
When did that change?
And who changed it?
Last election. Town meeting.
Oh, I thought it was annual. All right.
3 was.
So,
Years ago, because that's when John got his first 3-year term.
and 1 moderator for a term of 3 years.
What would you do without me?
Okay, thank you. I don't know, I'd be lost. Number 6, anyone interested in becoming an election worker should contact the town clerk's office for an application. Number 7, and finally, the next scheduled select board meeting will be on Monday, January 13th, 2025. Doesn't have a time. Should be 6:30 PM, right?
6:30 p.m.
Okay.
All right.
Wait. Is it-
Add that the next select board meeting is to be this
Actually, Thursday. The next select board meeting is this Thursday.
Oh, well,
Any
Yes.
frozen shellfish motions?
no, there are no bonus.
Frozen
bonus
shellfish.
licenses.
All
Frozen
right.
is bonus.
There's one more announcement.
What?
The next select board meeting will be Thursday.
Oh, yeah, actually, that's true.
Yeah, so that will be Thursday, the 9th. We will be meeting jointly with the,
7 p.m.
yeah,
Finance
7.
committee.
I have it at 6:30?
6:30 at the Ellison Center.
And it's a hard stop.
All right, let me try that again.
Yep.
Not work after a certain time, and it is a hard.
So the next scheduled select board meeting will be on Thursday, January 9th at 6:30 PM, a joint meeting with the Finance Committee at the Ellison Room of the Senior Center. That's the large room on the first floor. All right, great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll take a
Thank
motion to
you.
adjourn.
So moved.
All
Oh,
those in
second.
favor?
Aye.
Great work, everyone.